said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say, 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, so I'm terribly sorry. Listen, no, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. It's coming up to about 3 minutes past 10 o'clock, and it's absolutely fabulous to have your company, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Always good to have your company. Absolutely brilliant show from Alex Phillips yesterday, marking those V-Day commemorations, celebrations, and amazing stories from all of you as well. More V-Day events today, of course, and the King and the Queen will be going to the Tower of London to see that extraordinary poppy installation. Absolutely stunning, that. Lots to talk about. It's my first time back on air since a few little events on Thursday, got the results on Friday, and just extraordinary turnabout in terms of where our politics are going. Game changer is a phrase that is perhaps overused, but wow, Thursday's results was absolutely a game changer. We're going to talk a lot about that today, about where that takes us, what happens in the future. In particular, the reaction from the Tories and Labour to that challenge from Labour, because they ain't got it before now. Will they get it now? Well, today we understand the Home Office is going to plan to restrict work and study visa applications from countries who are most likely to overstay and claim asylum under new plans by Labour to crack down on abuse of the system. They finally got it, that actually people are a bit unhappy about not just illegal migration but legal migration. Loads of people arrive on study visas, arrive on work visas, and they basically do their visa. As soon as it's up, turns out now I need to claim asylum. Really? Or now also I'm destitute. Now I need you to pay for my accommodation as well. The nationalities to be targeted in particular include Pakistanis, Nigerians and Sri Lankans. Some 30 or 40% of the applications for asylum are not from people arriving on those Channel migrant boats. It's people doing this. So is that a good thing? And why did no one think of it before? Might be a reasonable question for you to wonder. We're also going to be talking about the possibility of a winter fuel allowance U-turn. Lots of talk about that. The Guardian front page today suggesting that government spokespeople saying, no, they're not looking at it. But are they? This is all in the wake of those disastrous local election results for Labour. Disastrous also, of course, for the Tories. But I'd love to know your reaction. Would either of those policies, would both of those policies, would they be a game changer for you, to use that word again? Would that be enough to win back votes for Labour? What could the Tories do to get your vote back if you're one of the many people who have swung to reform, as the polls would suggest. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. You can also get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about the accommodation which we paid for in Rwanda and then sent, I think, was it 2 people, and they went voluntarily. So we actually paid them $3,000 each to get on those flights. That accommodation now could be used to house migrants deported from the US by Donald Trump. Brilliant. What a great system. Plus, of course, there are big movements regarding the Tory leadership of Kemi Badenoch, as Conservative MPs are actually holding meetings this week as Parliament returns today after the party's terrible performance in local elections about her future. And the great Ginger Whinger has been back in the news, stealing, I felt, rather unfairly, the headlines due to reform over the weekend as he basically hit out at the latest court decision against him over his security, talked about his father and his family, and he's accused of by Buckingham Palace insiders of giving a scorched earth interview in which he has shown he has simply lost touch with reality. Well, all of that and plenty more besides, including the small matter of the threat of attack by Russia, which apparently we have decided to start preparing for, and we're going to be chatting about all that throughout the show, hopefully with you on the phone lines, 0344 499 1000, but also with Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, who, as always, well, every other Tuesday joins us in the studio for the chit and the chat. Tom, thank you very much for joining us.
Morning, Julia.
Did you have a good bank holiday?
I did. I wasn't in the country, fun enough. I was in Germany.
You've changed. You've changed.
but I did. A lot of good times.
I did a little bit of a trip to Italy for my birthday, but I have to say, keeping quite a watching brief on the news, sitting there on a chairlift in Capri going, oh, look at that result, look at that result. Very exciting times. I mean, let's just first of all just talk about, reactions. First time we've both been on air since that result. I listened to your Spike podcast about it, but, that reform result, there's no doubt at all. I mean, they talk about, the Lib Dems did quite well too, and the Greens, I'm sorry, differently. That was a game change for British politics, wasn't it? That is not an underestimate.
No, absolutely. I mean, the words historic local election, they don't often appear next to each other, but this is the genuine exception. This is shaping up to be the most serious challenge to the two-party duopoly for 100 years. You've had Labour and the Tories ruling the roost for a century, and now they can't even get 50% of the vote share together. That's really uncharted territory. Also, it disproves, or certainly challenges, one of the claims that was always made, not just against reform, but its predecessors in the Brexit Party and UKIP, which is that you can generate a certain level of publicity and support. Where's your ground game? Where's your people who are knocking on doors, canvassing, know where to get your vote out, and so on? Yeah. They have demonstrated that they have come on leaps and bounds since even last summer's election. So all of this is shaping up to be, even though, as you were saying earlier, these words historic, unprecedented, etc. are used ad nauseum these days in British politics, this definitely qualifies.
It's absolutely fascinating how we have been talking about this for a long time. I've been writing about this for a long time. I wrote a piece back last December about possibility of Elon Musk's money being a game changer without even getting that $100 million. They have made this massive achievement. It seemed to come as something of a surprise to an awful lot of the commentators, the great and the good, the experts, not the John Curtis, the people who pay attention to the polls, but they're utterly surprised and bewildered by a lot of this.
No, absolutely. And you think the writing's been on the wall for so long. I mean, we knew that Labour's victory in last summer's election was this kind of sandcastle majority, which could easily be washed away. The fact that it was won on a historically low turnout, historically low vote share for a majority government. It was quite clear that people just kind of acquiesced, letting them rule over us, but people still got it into their heads that this was Labour kind of conquering all before it. We all knew how unpopular this government was. We also knew that this was largely rebounding to the benefit of reform, because the Conservatives are seen still as a kind of tainted brand, and also not really being able to capitalise on the moment that has been presented.
Who's most under threat, do you think? The Tories or Labour? But at the end of the day, Labour are in power. There is actually, people talk about, Keir Starmer's not going to last. Who's the obvious alternative? I mean, actually, a lot of people would say Wes Streeting seems like the most sensible option. He talks again, he speaks human, he's on top of things, I think he's very likeable. But if you look at the polling among Labour Party members, no, he's seen as a Blairite figure. He's far too right-wing for them. He's far too sensible, you could say, for them. So, I mean, again, Keir Starmer had to really pivot left to win that vote. So, you know, and there isn't a mechanism to oust, there really isn't, to oust a Labour leader once they're in office. That was kind of, many changes in these things. But Kemi Badenoch, there's no doubt at all that she is very vulnerable right now. There was a lot of talk even before these elections. Look, everyone knew they'd do badly. 2021 was a high water mark, the vaccine bounce for Boris Johnson. Everyone knows most of the seats up for grabs were Tories. So it was just, of course, they were going to lose more seats. But it was an absolute annihilation. I mean, it really was. And there's lots of talk about how MPs are actually meeting this week. Parliament comes back today. Today, you know, Nigel Farage will be in Parliament as his new MP, Sarah Potchin, is sworn in after the Runcorn by-election. I mean, an extraordinary result there, winning by 6 votes. I mean, they're on 4 votes to get recount, and then they find another 2. I think a lot of people were going, they're going to find another 6 in the other direction. But you know, there is still this pressure on Kemi Badenoch, criticism that she's not moving fast enough, she's not sort of setting the world on fire, she's not moving in the right direction. Some saying she needs to move to sort of the centre ground. William Hague's piece, you know, needs to be a big centre ground party, centre right. Others saying she needs to come and, you know, sort of line really, I suppose. You see more from the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick about moving to reform and perhaps looking at some sort of, you know, deal. I mean, there's not going to be a deal on offer from the Reform Party, but what are the choices available to Kemi Badenoch?
I mean, they're very difficult because of the fact that what a lot of people say about their vote splitting in both directions is true. If they are seen to move further to the right, which often just means sort of more to the common sense centre these days, but nevertheless that will upset the people that they're losing to the Lib Dems in Middle England and so on, whereas at the same time, if they kind of continue to not stand out, to not make an impact on a lot of the big issues that people really care about, they're going to, particularly things like immigration, they're going to lose ground to reform. All of that is true. I think this would happen under conceivably anyone who was elected leader of the Conservative Party.
In the wake of 14 years in power.
Exactly, and again, another historic, to use that word again, defeat for them last summer. I mean, this is something which was always going to be a tremendous job, not least because of the fact that they want to be still maintain their position as the party of the right in British politics, but they want to do it with a coalition which doesn't really make sense anymore. Those two factions.
If you want to appeal to Lib Dems, then, you know, a party, by the way, neither Liberal nor Democrat. But they proved that in recent years on censorship. They proved that on Brexit. Neither Lib or Dem. I voted Lib Dem a number of times. I'm a genuine floating voter. Everyone thinks, you know, I've voted for lots of different parties over the years. They're neither Liberal or Democrat anymore. If you want to appeal to the Lib Dems, then fine. But you're not going to be in power again. No. There's a reason why the Lib... Here's an idea. If someone wants to vote Lib Dem, they've got an option. Oh, they can vote Lib Dem. I mean, seriously, though, that's things... This is the thing I find interesting, and I think this is where Nigel Farage sweeps up those votes because, and again, the commentariat are so scathing. I read the Politico email. This is a regular email sent out everyone. Lots of information about what's going on in the day and analysis of all the big stories. And it's a really good summary of things. And it's always so sort of holding its nose about anything to do with the reform. Oh, Nigel Farage just really wants to be in the spotlight. It's like, they wouldn't write that about Ed Davey. They wouldn't if he'd just won the local ballot. If you see the way they cover the commentariat to a man and a woman, or probably all non-binary now, aren't they? They're just so snotty about it, and they just have not got to grips. Same as the way the Germans haven't got to grips the AfD. So, let's call them a prescribed, extremist organisation. The French haven't got to grips with Marine Le Pen and her National Rally Party. The way that American commentariat hadn't got to grips with Trump's Republicans. You can agree or disagree with the people in charge, or the lots of the policies, some of the policies, all of the policies. But at the end of the day, this whole head in your sands thing by the commentariat, by the establishment, by the mainstream of just pretending this stuff isn't happening. Well, good luck with that, because Thursday told you what happens when you do that.
And it's incredible that they're still underestimating Reform and Farage, despite the fact that, we've
it's a protest vote
before. I mean, it's one of those things where, Nigel Farage, agree with him or disagree with him, like him or dislike him, is one of the most consequential politicians of this era. He's been on the political scene for well over 20 years now in a very prominent
He's the reason why we are where we are.
Absolutely, in terms of, actually getting the Brexit referendum to be held, and the fact that he's now been able to shift into actually setting up a genuine sort of political, more sustainable political movement is something which was clearly on the cards, not least because that coalition which delivered Brexit, which is delivering populist parties all over the shop in Europe and, of course, America as well, is precisely the coalition that Nigel Farage is appealing to, which is the kind of old Labour working class, as well as sections of the kind of more traditional Tory middle class who still feel kind of alienated for the Conservative Party, the way that they've been treated and the issues of immigration and so on and so forth. That is proven a winning populist coalition across the board. He was clearly starting to reach into those areas, and yet you've still got commentators just kind of treating it as if it's a blip that's going to go away.
And again, I don't think of it as a protest vote at all. I think of it as a really positive vote. I mean, genuinely, I say I'm not holding a candle for any particular party, but it seems to me that actually it's a very positive vote. It's about believing in your country, believing in your values, thinking there's something worth protecting, wanting to protect sort of community values and the liberal values of this country and freedom of speech. And you know what, flying the Union Jack or the England's cross of St George rather than the rainbow flag or any other random flag at councils and town halls, and people are taking the mick out of the Reform Party for saying there's the use of the chairman. But actually, you know what? I'm quite happy for people to play, the Ukraine flag to show solidarity, or the Israeli flag to show solidarity. But again, it's the left that have kind of taken the mick on this front, and this is what happens. In terms of what parties can do to particularly the Labour Party in power, can do to tackle this, because I was going to say, that's one of the things about Nigel Farage is, when you've banged on, as he has, about the same topics again and again and again for years, people know he's genuine about it. And when you bang on about things like immigration, you bang on about things like the cost of living and stuff, and you talk about this stuff and how working class communities are being hurt and people are really hurting from cost of living crisis and being anti-net zero. If you've been saying the same thing for years, when people were abusing you and saying you were a racist and saying you were a bigot and saying you were a climate denier and all of that, and on the trans issue again, he's being banged to rights on everything, okay? So people know he's willing to say stuff that's unpopular and that the establishment don't like. When Labour and all the Tories or any other party sort of comes round to these things because, well, the public have told them they're not going to put up with net zero anymore, they're not going to put up with mass uncontrolled immigration anymore, legal or illegal, the thing is, no one trusts them. So that when the Tories, for instance, say that they might do the ECHR route, and that people go, well, fine. But you talked a good game before. You were in power 14 years and the problem got worse. 782,000 net migrants, more than a million on the latest figures for 23. What do you think about Labour's plan for a visa crackdown on nationalities? Basically, there's a lot of the asylum costs come from these people, as I mentioned. Student visa, work visa, and then they go, oh, turns out I can't go back to my country because I'd be persecuted. I need to seek asylum when that visa's over. Particularly, you're talking about Pakistanis, Nigerians and Sri Lankans, who then also say, oh, suddenly I'm destitute. I had to prove I had money to come here on the visa, but now I'm suddenly destitute and I need the state to pay for me. Do you think a crackdown on things like that is going to make a difference?
Well, if it bears results, potentially. I mean, it's one of those things where, even though quite understandably our focus is often on the small boats crossings because it's very visible, it's something that you're kind of confronted with images of on a day-to-day basis, this is still the kind of lion's share of kind of asylum, illegal migration. That issue is people overstaying visas effectively and then claiming asylum. So if it's the sort of thing which could actually kind of genuinely start to bring the numbers down, but I don't think anyone trusts that it will, because unless you're willing to sort of really grasp the nettle of this issue of asylum, which involves looking at the Refugee Convention, looking at the European Court of Human Rights and the way in which those enable judges to effectively make it incredibly difficult to remove anyone, it's you're surely going to be onto a loser. And also, even with the Labour Party, they have rhetorically, and to a certain extent in terms of policy, but nowhere near the same stretch, talked a big game on immigration. We had Keir Starmer saying that the open borders experiment is over, but they're not going to get any credit for it because no one believes it. When you hear Keir Starmer make those points,
they don't believe it.
And so it's one of those things where even if they started to make some, there were some changes around the edges, they're not going to get credit for it.
Also,
people
again,
are not going to believe them if they do.
Old enough to remember, getting net migration down to tens of thousands. I mean, come on, give me a credit. We ain't going to do that anytime soon. And people just say they've had enough. And they're not going to trust anyone who hasn't been talking about this when it really mattered. Just finally, what about the possibilities that number 10 is rethinking winter fuel payment cut? Obviously, Tories and Labour both hit in the local elections. There's no doubt at all when it comes to polling, it shows that winter fuel payment is the most resonant policy. That is Labour MPs say, basically Labour's poll tax policy. So unpopular. The front page of The Guardian, their political editor, Pippa Carrera, she knows her stuff. She's got good contacts. Apparently, Cabinet Minister saying this is an issue. Wes Streeting's been on the media round today, and he's basically saying, look, basically above my pay grade. I ain't the Chancellor. If there was a U-turn, and whether they were means testing it, whether they raised the threshold, so more pensioners who were on the poverty line were able to get it. Do you think that would make any difference, or is the damage already done?
I think the damage is already done. I think because of the fact that it's become part of the story of this government now. It wasn't just kind of one mistake that came out of the clear blue. It came straight after all of the freebies, and so that naturally that story writes itself in people's minds. And also because there's such a lack of trust in this government, I think people would just kind of pocket the U-turn, thank you very much. But they're not going to get any credit for it. And you
didn't do it. You did the policy, even though people thought it was wrong. I mean, I was just horrified by it. And then you only U-turned after you lost elections. So again, you don't believe the U-turn. It's not a thought-through policy. That's the thing, isn't it? You're just not going to get credit. No party's going to get credit for doing this stuff when they're forced to do it.
No, absolutely. And it's important to remember how much that winter fuel cut and some of the things that have happened around disability benefits and so on since then, that was the government's whole narrative. They were like, we need to make these tough decisions. Look how tough we're being. Look how sensible and fiscally responsible we're being. So to start unpicking that now raises real questions once again about what's the message here, what's the story, what is this government about? And we all know they haven't got an answer to that.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to hear your answer to this. Is that going to be enough, whether it's an immigration visa crackdown, a U-turn of any sort on the winter fuel allowance? What could Labour do to win back votes, do you think? Is it too far gone now? Would that be enough to win back your vote? What can Kemi Badenoch do in terms of the Tories? What should she do? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll get to your calls up next. This is Talk.
Firstly, you're absolutely right. They were fantastic local election results. We knew there was the opportunity for us to do quite well in a number of places that had elections, but to actually take outright control of 10 county councils, 2 combined authority mayors, And of course, the Runcorn and Helsby by-election, which, let's not remember, that was one of Labour's safest seats in the country. The majority that they were defending in that seat was bigger than the majority Keir Starmer has in his own constituency in Holborn and St Pancras. That's the scale of the challenge that we were up against.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater also still with me. Coming up in a very few moments, we're going to be talking to Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, about these latest Labour policy announcements, or possible announcements, in terms of winning back votes. Well, any of it worked. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Mary's got in touch and says, will it be a mission-led crackdown on immigration visas? Counts for nothing if not. I think Mary may be being a little bit sarcastic. Veronica says, again, it's not legal migrants that apply for visas to work. It's illegal migrants coming on small boats that we as a nation want rid of. And, well, he knows it, so stop insulting our intelligence. Your toast, reform or our next government, get used to that fact. No, I'm more worried about the ones we don't know about, at least the documented ones on the visas. We actually know who they are, less likely to be a danger to us. However, pretty unhappy about people coming here on a work or student visa and then suddenly discovering that they can't go home. Really? It's just to be automatic you don't get to stay, just automatic. And by the way, the people who don't even apply, they still here. The government has no idea. You know, all that faff you have going in and out of the country and the fuss they make of your passport and didn't quite read, you have to go in the queue to see the nice man, the electronic visa, the passport didn't work. Yeah. Once you're in the country, whether you're from this country or not, they have no idea. Absolute, complete waste of time. You know what the solution would be if Tony Blair was here? Digital ID cards. Vic says Labour will make legal immigration harder. They're a soft target. Nothing will be done about the tens of thousands of young men arriving illegally. Harley says, too late, the earthquake has happened. There's no stopping the wave. Tony says, given they claim the winter fuel cut was made to help plug a black hole, what taxes are they now going to increase? That's exactly the point you were making, John. Let's go to Andrew, who's on the line in Hertfordshire. He's given us a call on 0344 499 1000. Andrew, very good morning to you. What do you make of the government planning an immigration visa crackdown? Talk of some sort of partial U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. Is that enough to win back those votes?
Good morning, Julia. I hope you had a great break.
Thank you.
Those two statements are irrelevant, aren't they? If you take them and just boil them down, you've just discussed it through, as I did with your guy on the phones. That's
what we call him. That's his job title on his. Guy on the phone.
So those things are baked in now. They can never come back from that. Blair can never come back from the Iraq War. Neil Kinnock can never come back from falling over.
Hold on a minute. The Iraq War. I mean, he would still have won the election if he hadn't handed over to Brown after the Iraq War.
Yeah, well, so we think. But what's done is done. What can Starmer do? There's two things Starmer can do to actually get control now. Farage is going to drive him into the ground. He's got local control. He's done flags. He can look at schools now, and he can be like Khan. Khan was the Labour Mayor of London, and he's the thorn in every Conservative government. Look at the Heathrow. New runway, straight away he's taking the government to court. Farage can start to target things such as why are schools being shut down, academies, and they can be really relevant locally. But Starmer has two ways out. Number one is he likes a windfall tax on successful companies. He needs to fine Deliveroo $2 billion for enabling illegal immigrants to work in the UK. He needs to do it this week. And the second thing he needs to do is to act like a leader and start actually moving people around. He needs to move Miliband on, Rayner on, and he needs to do it this week. Because at the moment, he's driven by an agenda, and he looks weak because he is.
Well, that was interesting. Some reports yesterday, the paper's talking about how, and party, figures saying, he needs to go with his gut instinct, he needs to act everything. But his gut instinct is all the things that voters don't like.
Yeah.
He moves Ed Miliband on. So what? He's still completely. It's Keir Starmer's net zero policy, not Ed Miliband's net zero policy.
Then you're very spot on. I agree with you. But look at what the public are doing. They voted in reform and they like the policies.
Yep.
He either wants to be successful and drive and bring the country with him, or he's got 3 years. I don't think they'll do their term. They're going to have to go to the country soon.
Why? Why would they have to go to the country? They've got a majority of best part of two. Was it 150 now or something? 160?
Because there's no such. There's nothing so isolated as leadership after victory. And if you look, I think it was Napoleon said that, or the Duke of Wellington. If you look at him now, he's sitting
one of
there.
The two.
Yeah, that's right. He's sitting in number 10. The left hate him. The right hate him. His own party.
And he doesn't believe in anything. And such as he does believe in anything, it's pretty much the opposite of what the British people believe. I know, but there's no way of ousting him if he doesn't want to go.
Exactly, but he's pulling in £35,000 net a month in pension for sitting there. So why doesn't he just say, look, I'm out?
Because power is very, very enticing to people. The question is why people want power in the first place. Andrew, interesting call. Thank you very much. Let's go to Louise, who is in Kent. Good morning to you, Louise.
Good morning, Julia. Well, I've just read absolutely... Frederick Merz has failed to get past the first round of getting in to be Chancellor.
Who?
Unheard of. So he's Frederick Merz.
Merz. So sorry, the German Chancellor. I'm thinking, what are we talking about? Yeah.
So he's failed the first round to get to Chancellor, so that's a bit mind-blowing. But what I was going to talk to you about primarily was this winter fuel allowance. But Labour have got a real problem ahead of them because we've got the junior doctors threatening to go out and strike again because they want their full restoration in spite of their huge pay award last year. Teachers are threatening to go out, nurses and everybody else. Yeah. Now they're looking at this winter fuel allowance. And then somebody says, well, let's put in a wealth tax. What are you not hearing? That everybody's already left because of a non-dom.
What do you think if there was a U-turn of some sort on the winter fuel allowance?
I think what they ought to do is...
No. If there was a U-turn, would that be a game changer? Would that make a difference?
No, it wouldn't to me at all. But it wouldn't make... Because I don't have any trust in them anyway. I would never vote for Labour in a month's time. And I remember the winter of discontent, which I'm afraid we're heading rapidly for this winter. Well,
I think people talk about it happening already before then in the summer. Louise, thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. Look, she wasn't going to vote Labour anyway. We're going to have more from Tom Slater in a few moments. We're going to be talking to Freddie Gray from The Spectator to find out what all these new policies might make a difference to. And we'll talk to Rupert Bell about Prince Harry's latest whinging and also more on the VE Day commemorations and celebrations. 10:33 is the time. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:34 is the time. Let's talk right now to Freddie Gray. He's Deputy Editor of The Spectator and joins us. A very good morning to you, Freddie.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank
How are you?
Very well indeed. Look, I mean, not as well as Nigel Farage with the spring in his step today. Parliament returns after its little election break. He's going to be bringing in his brand new MP for Runcorn, Sarah Pochin, to have her sworn in. And he's got 677 council seats, one out of about 1,600. He's got control of 10 councils, 2 mayoralties as well. Question. Was what happened last Thursday, was that a game changer? And if so, can Labour, can the Tories do anything to change the rules of that game?
I think it was. I mean, we have to wait and see whether it was a real game changer, but I think it looks like a very significant moment in British politics. And I think it's the moment where both the Labour Party and the Tory Party realise that reform aren't helpful to Labour, are realising reform aren't really helpful to them. They are actually a threat to Labour now, quite a serious threat to Labour. And the Tories have realised that they are not just facing an existential threat, they are in the death throes. Their party is in serious trouble. It was always thought that the Conservatives would have great organisational advantages over reform and perhaps funding advantages over reform. Those are gone. Reform is now the credible opposition. And you can see already today Labour rolling out policies on immigration. We can talk more about those in a sec, but the fact that they are shows you that they know that immigration is the issue in modern Western electoral politics.
But again, the polling shows that actually cost of living is the issue that most voters put first. But again, there's no doubt at all. Right. There's cost of living, there's public services like the NHS. Everyone will know someone waiting ages for some sort of treatment or been in A&E and waited hours and hours or days for a bed or any treatment at all. And of course, immigration. Those three issues combined. Do you think that Keir Starmer, given the man that he is, the background he has, the personality he has, is capable of making the changes to policy that would actually bring back a lot of those voters, given that, look, you know, you talk about a lot of red wall seats, people who voted for Boris, voted for Brexit, wanted to get things done. They're concerned about immigration. They've been hit by the globalisation and all the liberal values. Oh, let's bring in everyone from Eastern Europe. Won't that be great for the economy? Pretty much every single thing that he stands for, they oppose. Pretty much every single thing that they stand for, he opposes. So can he square that circle?
Well, to a certain extent, because Keir Starmer doesn't really stand for anything. I mean, he's like jelly. But I think he's like jelly in his rhetoric. But when it comes to actually implementing policies, the Labour Party, I think, is incapable of delivering serious change on immigration. A lot of its membership don't agree with a serious crackdown on immigration. That will be a major issue for them. So you'll see tinkering around the edges. You'll see tinkering on visa applications for students, which is actually quite an important issue. But does anyone think that's actually going to be implemented in a serious and profound way? No, because the Tories talked about doing that and never did it properly. Our problem, Britain's problem, is that we have a political class that know what the public want but are completely incapable of delivering it. And Keir Starmer sums up that problem almost perfectly.
Well, you're saying capable of delivering it. I mean, they could deliver it. They are choosing not to deliver it because they don't agree with the public that it's a problem. That's the fundamental thing. They don't agree that mass, uncontrolled, legal immigration is a problem. They don't really think that illegal immigration is a problem, a lot of the political class, not just Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, a lot of the Tory side as well, don't really think it's an issue because, you know, asylum and being a nice country, they don't really agree with a lot of these things.
Well, they think it's a messaging problem. They think they just need to signal that they're being tough on immigration and to signal that they're serious about bringing down the cost of living, which, as you quite rightly say, is the most important issue. But they don't really believe in actually bringing things down or reducing immigration numbers or reducing the cost of living. They don't really have serious ideas about how to do it. I'm not sure the public is convinced that reform do. but Reform are in a happy
Why
place
do you
now.
say that? I mean, when people have been talking about this for 20 years, when people have been talking about it and taking the flack that everyone who's talked about it has taken, as someone who's taken a lot of flack over the years as well, bigot, fascist, racist, again, oh, well, we're just throwing random words out at people for expressing the views of the majority of the population. But they haven't come to those policies just because, we've done badly in an election. They've had those policies when they weren't supposedly acceptable and popular and were vote winners.
No, I mean, I think people like Reform. That's clear. That's obvious. Reform are increasingly popular, and rightly so, because I've identified the issues that people care about. But when it comes to winning a general election, Reform will have to have policies that people really believe will bring down the cost of living.
And will actually be able to implement them.
And be able to implement them. And I think they do have ideas. I think people like to say they're just a sort of empty vessel. I don't think that's true. But their suggestions, particularly on immigration, I think, they'll look across the pond to Trump. Obviously, Reform are trying to establish a bit of distance with Trump at the moment. Yeah. They'll look at what he's doing there. And if he is as successful in a few years' time as he has been so far, reducing illegal entries by about 95%, being serious, talking really tough about deportations, actually doing some deportations too, then I think Reform will be able to point that and say, we're going to do that in Britain, and that will be quite popular. Yeah,
I mean, the fact that we've got this talk about Donald Trump using the hotels paid for by British taxpayers, that's what's it, 650 million quid, and he's possibly going to use them to support some of the illegal migrants in America the irony of that. What do you make of the announcement today about this visa crackdown on the nationalities, those who come here? They come here, and this thing, the vast majority of people who are living in this country illegally, didn't come on the small boats. I think those are the ones we are rightly most worried about in terms of we don't know who these people are. And again, a lot of them are coming from countries where, such as we can identify them, where they have a very different culture and attitude to, certainly to women in particular, than most people have in this country. But we've got a huge number of people who arrive here legally, student visa, work visa, particularly we're told from countries like Pakistan, Nigeria and Sri Lanka. They arrive here, they finish, their visa comes to an end, they go, oh, I've suddenly discovered, turns out that I need political asylum, I'm not safe to go home. And then they're on the public payroll, where suddenly they're destitute, we need to pay for them for their hotel, their rental accommodation, and they can stay here for years and years, and who are we kidding? Even if someone actually says they're going to deport them, they'll never actually be gone. I mean, we do need to crack down on that, but will that be enough if if the Labour Party did actually achieve that? Would that be enough?
If the Labour Party was serious about doing it, then it would be a very significant step in the right direction. I mean, boats are obviously the egregious issue that people get very upset about. But the real problem in our immigration system is essentially fraud. People entering through legal methods, but abusing the system. And the numbers on that are huge. This sounds like a good move from the Labour Party. I mean, certainly on student visas, we know that there's a lot of people abusing the student visa system to stay in Britain longer than they should. Again, though, talk to the experts about it, and they'll say this is the way that Labour will implement this means very, very few numbers of people being rejected. Yeah. I think, again, this is a signalling thing. They're trying to say, oh, look, we're going to say, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, countries that, the public might think, yeah, we have seen quite a lot of abuse from those countries. It sounds tough. We like the sound of that. But actually, are they going to include India on that? There's a large number of people coming through from India on student visas, on family visas, amounting to huge numbers. We're talking 700,000 last year. Yes, that's down from the disaster Tory years, but it's not down enough. And I don't think there's a serious plan. We'll see what this white paper says, but I don't think there's a serious plan to bring it down into the under 100,000, serious numbers that people want.
And also, you've got the same issue in terms of the reason why they're letting all these people in is because they're cheap, largely unskilled workforce, great for their business paymasters. The unions might not like it, but there's also a lot of big millionaire donors to all the political parties. But at the end of the day, these people have to live somewhere. They use public services. Unless they're earning over 45, 50 grand a year, they are not net contributors. And they are a massive drain on society. But until we have a welfare system that requires people who haven't got a job, who are themselves low skills, especially young people leaving school, leaving uni, to take some of those jobs because they need to eat and pay their bills, you are not going to solve that problem.
No. I mean,
it needs a level of joined-up thinking that I don't think this government or the last government was remotely capable of.
No, exactly, because, well, I mean, the last government was so panicked about inflation that they essentially just opened the floodgates to migration in an attempt to bring down labour costs.
Yeah.
That did not work.
Nope.
Cost of living still went up. And as you say, introducing large numbers of migrants into a country has massive costs as well.
Absolutely.
Housing, health, education, all these things.
And cultural impact, which again, the middle class commentariat who don't have an issue with it are simply and utterly, completely isolated from. Just finally, people talk about Keir Starmer's future, but he's the leader of the Labour Party, he's the Prime Minister. Very difficult for him to be ousted. What are the alternatives there? Kemi Badenoch, though, much more at risk in terms of her leadership. Does she survive another year?
Not on current trajectories, I don't think so. I think she's been a disaster so far.
Is she the problem? Is the party the problem? Are the policies a problem? What's the issue?
The party is in big trouble, but they desperately need a brilliant leader. The problem is they don't have one. I think all the things Kemi was supposed to be, kind of robust, willing to, talk about the tough issues and so on.
Take the fight to the parties.
Take the fight. I mean, so far, probably her biggest win has been on adolescence, where she said the right things. It was a TV show. There was a weird cultural mania about it. She said, I don't have to watch it. And, that was quite a good moment for her, because the public, I think, would have thought, well, why should she be bullied into watching a TV documentary?
I don't think most members of the public are even remotely aware of it, to be honest. But there we are. Freddie, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us, Deputy Editor of Spectator. Tom Slater, do you want to come in on all of that?
No, I think on that final point there's been a few sort of moments in which the Conservatives have managed to get some cut through. The grooming gangs issue, I suppose, is one. The farmers' taxes was something that they were able to capitalise on to an extent.
Trans stuff, but Kemi was signed on the trans stuff.
Absolutely, and that was something that you say about like Nigel Farage having a track record on that issue. She certainly has a track record on that issue. I think the problem is, whilst it's quite clear that Kemi Badenoch is struggling to make inroads as Conservative leader, it's not obvious that anyone can make inroads as Conservative leader right now. So any kind of assessment of what should happen and when, I think, has to be with that in mind.
That's why I wonder, how much is her, how much is policies? And it's not tenable to go, we haven't got an election for a few years, we're going to have 2 years of policy making. I don't think anyone should want to be the leader of any political party and want to be Prime Minister of this country without knowing what their policies are. I don't want you to focus group policies. I want you to have thought through your views already, to have come to those views because you've looked at the facts, you've spoken to experts. I mean, if you're running to be leader of a party, I think it's bizarre if people don't know what they want to do. Why else are you running to be Prime Minister? What would you do that unless you had an aim? This is what I want to achieve.
And also, it's not as if everyone wants a manifesto right now. Just a kind of couple of clear, crisp positions on the main issues would be enough to really start to land some blows against the government. You don't need a commission
on the ECHR. You don't need a commission on it. If you haven't thought this through already in the last 5-10 years, you're not going to think about it any further.
Absolutely. And again, it's all internal calculations. That's why we know they're not taking a position on the ECHR or anything else, because there's people in their party who really should be in the Lib Dems who they still need to keep in the fold, and that's it explains a lot of the inaction.
It does, doesn't it? 10:48 is the time. Coming up, I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on this as well. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. We're going to hear Rupert Bell's thoughts on Prince Harry and latest whinging from the Ginger Whinger, but also the latest on what is happening to mark the amazing 80th anniversary of VE Day this week. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
there's an important point about justice being seen to be done. And I think the major problem we have with the immigration tribunals at the moment is that justice is rarely seen to be done. We see all these crazy-looking decisions coming out of the tribunal, and anyone who wants to understand them has to read through a 40-page case decision. It shouldn't be this complicated. We have spent the last sort of 4 or 5 decades wrapping this issue up, or issues around asylum and immigration, in lots and lots of really complicated law.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk of royal news and indeed, I think rather more importantly, V-Day commemoration news right now with Talk's royal correspondent Rupert Bell. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk first of all about the important stuff, commemoration of the amazing heroism of those who fought and died for us in the Second World War. VE Day commemoration, some extraordinary scenes yesterday. I know some amazing moving stories on the show yesterday where Alex Phillips moved to tears by many of the amazing stories. What is happening today as part of the commemorations?
Well, actually, there's a whole series of events throughout the week. And yesterday, sadly, I was flying back from China, but I know people who are in London yesterday were able to really see that spectacular fly past, which took people's breath away, and it really did. And everyone was sort of, wherever you were in London, if you were sort of in a central London, everyone was looking up and just stopped everything. And it is very important, these whole series, this commemoration service at Westminster Abbey. But if you look to the 8th, now that is actually VE Day. Yeah. This is when we really need to sort of take focus and take stock, because in essence this is the last really celebration that we can actually have people who remember it in some shape or form. And that, I think, is the key point of this whole week of VE Day celebrations. Absolutely. That we had people who were there and make sure that we as future generations remember the sacrifices that those individuals went through. Because we are in very chastened times at the moment, and we have to focus people's mind and saying, goodness me, this could happen again to us. Even seeing today, Keir Starmer is worried by threats from Russia. Our defense, so we need. And if you look back to the 30s, the way the sort of build up of, we appease, and then in the end, what happens? We still up going to war. So it's a very... It's very like
poignant. It's very poignant. I thought it was very noticeable also looking at, the royal family on the balcony at Buckingham Palace. Not a single person there who had served in the Second World War. We always had, we had Prince Philip, we'd have the Queen, and the time has passed, and that's an indication of, how much time has passed. But still such a significant thing, and it's one of the things I keep pointing out to people. I mean, I was tweeting about it yesterday, that, we should honour that memory, not just by taking a moment and obviously on other important days, armistice days and others, remembering that sacrifice, but celebrating that amazing moment of winning that war in Europe, but also crucially honouring those who died and fought and had their battle scars, mental and physical, for life, by making sure we maintain those freedoms, those values, that culture, all the things that people were fighting for back then.
Yeah, history, if you look through history, it repeats itself. And, we thought we were in this wonderful time of perfect peace and harmony, but through history, most of the time we seem, if you look through British history, we go to war every 25 years. It's a generational thing. In the Victorian era, you think it was a wonderful era, but we were permanently conflict somewhere.
I think my generation in particular, growing up without wars, other than the Falklands, were far away, not really understanding yet how exactly significant that is. Someone who's always at war, it appears, is Prince Harry. He, I think, rather ruthlessly stole an awful lot of their headlines over the weekend, which were deserved by Reform for their victory in their war in the local elections. But he lost latest court battle over his security. The one thing I actually agree with him on, I think the man needs greater security when he's in the UK. UK, although I think it's an excuse about not bringing the wife and kids back. I don't think Meghan will let him bring the kids back. I find it extraordinary that this is a man who says he doesn't know how much longer his father has to live, but doesn't let him see his own grandchildren, which is bit telling. But it is his latest set of whinging. He's saying he's feeling very let down. He said he would love a reconciliation, but claimed his father won't speak to him. Of course he won't speak to him. It always ends up in a book or in a documentary. But he says he doesn't know how much longer his father has to live. And he says he has, though, forgiven his family, i.e. his brother and his father in particular. But, I mean, a lot of people are saying, look, this is just the latest ginger whinge. He's been accused by some insiders at the palace of having totally lost touch with reality. What do you say to that?
I think he has lost touch with reality. I mean, on the security issue, they've always said that every time he comes here, it will be assessed. Now, if he wanted to bring his children and family, and he was going to stay in Sandringham, Windsor, Balmoral, you name it, there's enough security around there for his family to be perfectly safe. So it's an excuse. There's no more two ways about it. In a way, what he should have done, he should have gone away with his tails between the leg after the court hearing and said, right, I'm going to stay stum for a bit. I'm going to be quiet.
He doesn't have to do that.
And then instead, he puts his head right above the parapet and goes hock deep in basically having a pop at everybody and blaming everybody else. The problem is, he thinks none of it is his fault. He's prepared to forgive the royal family for their treatment. What about him saying to the royal family, I'm sorry for the things I've said? We've even seen some of his friends coming out in the press saying they're absolutely appalling the way he's behaved and they can't be friends with him anymore. I think Ben Goldsmith is quoted, and he, part of a very close set of friends, he's what, 2 or 3 years older than Harry, knows him well, and he said he can't forgive him for his behaviour, and I think that's the problem.
Well, I assume that he, like everyone else, has been ousted from Harry's circle, because it does appear to be that's what Meghan's MO is. And again, she does it with her own family, does it with his family and friends. Look, you know, I don't like this whole Lady Macbeth thing, but it's quite clearly there is a massive issue here. Philip Ingram, who we have regularly on the show on the Thursday, who's suffering from PTSD himself as an ex-military man, he's convinced that Prince Harry is suffering from severe PTSD that's hasn't been properly diagnosed, and he needs help.
I mean, I think at the moment he does, but the trouble is he's got no one else around him other than his wife. Now, what he needs, he talks about family being so important. Well, she hasn't got her family. Yes, they've got their 2 children. He hasn't got his family, so he's just drifting. He would need someone. If his brother or anyone said, look, come on, help here, but he's too stubborn, too ignorant, I don't know, too thick, I don't know what it is. But if he is suffering from PTSD, then he needs help. He actually needs now to let go. It's now been 4 or 5 years now that he's gone on this
and also people often treat him as if he's sort of a 22-year-old. He's 40 years old. He's a grown man. He's a father. You know, exactly. There is and also, again, if you really are worried that your father, you know, you don't know how long he's got, I mean, you know, how serious his cancer is, you might want to maybe pay a visit. You might maybe want to bring the kids over. I don't know. Might be the sort of thing to do. Talks Royal Correspondent Rick Bell, thank you as always for joining us. Tom Slater, I know, you know, you hate talking about the royals things, but I'm annoyed with myself for how much I'm fascinated about this. And again, we're not royal insiders. We've no idea what goes on in Harry's head, what goes on in that marriage. You know, who knows? I think being a part of the firm would have been horrific as well. Again, if they'd gone off and had a private life, great, but they didn't. But this latest outburst, that's not going to help anything, is it?
No, absolutely. And it's all just part of his victim complex, isn't it? I mean, even when he's got a point, which I agree with you, he does in this particular narrow instance. I mean, there's not many people with a bigger target on their head, given that he also quite unwisely bragged about how many, you know, Taliban fighters he killed in his autobiography. But still, even so, because it all gets channeled through this woe is me thing, it just makes it less and less likely he's going to have this reconciliation he claims that he wants to have.
You can completely understand why the members of the royal family back here don't want to speak to him, because everything they say, you know, text messages, anything, will end up in the latest book or in the latest Netflix documentary, and it's not that complicated, is it? Anyway, plenty more coming up. Want to hear from you as well. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk with the Home of Common Sense.
said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say, 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Fabulous to have your company. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, with you all the way until 1 o'clock. Coming up in this hour, Labour are set to try and make some immigration announcements that will bring back some of those voters who defected to reform at the local elections and that Runcorn by-election last Thursday. The Home Office said they want to restrict work and study visa applications from countries who are most likely to have their people overstay and claim asylum miraculously 3 years after their visa expires. Under new plans, they want to crack down on abuse of the system. The nationalities likely to be targeted include Pakistanis, Nigerians and Sri Lankans, who were most likely to be making those claims. Also, Britain is secretly preparing for a direct military attack by Russia amid fears that we are not ready for war. I mean, I'm not preparing that secretly, are we, given that we know about it? Officials have been asked to update a 20-year-old contingency plan that would put the country on a war footing after threats of attacks by the Kremlin. We're going to be talking to Andrew Fox about that, and also about the latest plans from the Israeli government and the IDF for taking over Gaza, possibly forever. Plus, one of the Iranian men arrested on suspicion of plotting a major terror attack in Britain has close connections to the regime in Tehran, it's been revealed. The suspect was one of 5 people detained at the weekend in a joint operation involving counter-terrorism police and members of the special forces. Plus, cutting costs for families should come before expensive net zero goals. Who says that? Well, me. Banging on for the last 10 years. But voters now overwhelmingly believe that too. A poll by Merlin Strategy for The Sun found that 6 out of 10 Brits agreed that action to reduce the cost of living has to come first over sustainability and being eco-friendly. Told you these policies don't survive contact with reality. Anyway, I want to hear from you, and lots to talk about. It's the first time I've been on air since that amazing set of results of Reform Party and the Runcorn by-election, and the local elections as well. I mean, Reform now in control of 10 councils. They're now back up to 5 MPs. Sarah Potchin is going to be sworn in as an MP today, no doubt, with Nigel Farage at her side. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, well, what Labour is trying to do to shore themselves up, because they're planning an immigration visa crackdown. Lots of talk about how they might U-turn on the winter fuel allowance cut, maybe means testing it, maybe sort of a partial U-turn in the wake of those disastrous local election results for them. What can they do? Would that be enough to win back voters? Love to hear your thoughts on that. What can Kemi Badenoch and the Tories do to win back those voters? Or, frankly, is it the end of the Tory party? Certainly seems to be the end of leader Kemi Badenoch's future. A lot of people are saying, I want to hear your thoughts on all of this. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk and then your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Joining me for all the chat today is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Thanks once again for joining us.
Morning.
Just in terms of just particular this visa crackdown on particular nationalities, Nigerians, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans and others who've been blamed for basically a biggest hit on asylum costs, the people who basically come here on a work visa, come here on a student visa, and then miraculously after 3 years or whatever on those visas go, oh, it turns out I need to claim asylum, I can't go home. And suddenly they then, a lot of them are on the public purse. Now they had money, they had a job, or they were studying. Suddenly they're destitute, and now we're having to look after them. I mean, I'm concerned that these people are playing the system. I don't think a single one of these people should be allowed. I mean, not a single one. End of. Bye-bye. Not my problem. But I think people are more concerned by these young men of fighting age coming over on the boats. We don't even know who they are, coming through that route. But how, if Labour did do a proper serious crackdown on this, would that be enough to show that they were serious about this issue?
Potentially. I mean, it would at least demonstrate some movement, would be something that they could talk about. We've done more on this than the Tories in 6 months than they have in 14 years, but I just don't think it's ever going to get to that point. I mean, yes, this is a large part of the problem of kind of asylum/legal migration. It's just the less eye-catching aspect of it.
We're not actually seeing pictures of them on the boats.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's something that, if you wanted to take on this issue, of course, you would need to look at and you would need to take very seriously. I think the problem is that even if they are serious about this, even if that means they're willing to take on the legal challenges which will be forthcoming, in some of the reporting it's already pointing out that because you're singling out particular countries, it would be presented as discriminatory. And we all know... I
mean, but discriminatory for a reason.
We all know how cases like this end up when they go through the courts. They always end up getting knocked back to the government. Is Keir Starmer, the human rights barrister, willing to actually take on our human rights framework in order to make this happen? It's unclear.
And they're all his mates. I mean, you could just have a chat with them over the latest dinner party, couldn't he? Instead of waiting to go to court.
He knows this area very well, allegedly. So you would think that he would be able to anticipate this. But again, even if you clear all those hurdles, I don't think people are going to give them any credit for it. I think people are switched on to what Labour is doing that's bad and completely switched off to the things that they are doing that might actually be a bit more...
Is it also known, the same with the Tories, whether it's what the Tories were doing in the final year of their government or what Kemi Badenoch is talking about in policies now as the new Tory leader, that actually it doesn't matter what you do just before an election or what you do in the wake of a bad election result or what you do because you're trying to win power. No one trusts either of these parties anymore. I mean, no one. Even the people who are still voting Tory or people who are voting Labour, they don't actually trust those party leaders to do anything about certain of these issues, because we know they don't actually care about these issues, because not only did they not talk about them for years, when other people did talk about them, they shouted racist, bigot, xenophobe at them. They just criticise those policies that people do suggest, saying you need to do something about it. So why would anyone trust them? They suddenly go, oh, it turns out, no, I do want to do something about it. Same with the trans thing. Yeah. I mean, again, although this is, I think, much more serious than that. If someone was willing to pretend that they believe that women have penises, how could you ever trust them on anything ever again? I mean, and that's your fundamental issue. No one believes a single sodding word that Keir Starmer says about anything.
Absolutely, and it's that collapse in trust which has led us to this point where the two-party duopoly looks like it's completely crumbling, because for slightly different reasons people just do not trust either of these parties. The Tories said one thing and did another for 14 years, particularly on immigration, but on many issues as well. Keir Starmer's Labour Party says one thing and then says the complete opposite and does nothing. I mean, it's a kind of, just this sort of merry-go-round of different policy positions, and even so he just seems to be sort of not landing any kind of political blows whatsoever. So it's one of those things where even the Labour government would have to deliver to such a kind of clear-cut noticeable in your everyday life degree on issues like cost of living and immigration for people to even start to warm to them, and even then that's a very long way back.
There would be a financial hit on the country short term in terms of there would be a shortage of labour. There would be, but you need to have that shortage of labour to focus minds on the needs to get people off welfare, particularly young, perfectly able-bodied people who just can't be bothered to work. Oh, I have a bit of anxiety today, so I'm not going to go to work. It's a bit chilly today, it might rain, can't go to work. Sorry, we need to have those people, and yes, and I know you've got a lovely little degree that you spent 50 grand on, which says that you're a graduate, but yeah, you're not actually going to get a graduate level job because you've been sold a horrible life from Blair onwards, and we need to get you into working. Sorry, as simple as that. But you're not going to get those wages up for them to do it. You're not, unless you haven't got that free, basic supply of unskilled, low-wage labour from abroad. But also, while you've also got the option of being on welfare benefits. Now that ties in, of course, with Labour talking about also, well, we are told from the editor of The Guardian, possibility of a U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. Now, even Wes Streeting, their health secretary, who was on doing the media round today, has admitted that there's no doubt at all the winter fuel allowance cut for everybody but those who were on the lowest income pension credit was basically it's Labour's poll tax. It's massively hit them. In all the polling, it shows that is the one policy that's broken through. We'll all witter on, and people who watch and listen to stations like this will be really aware of politics. It's what we do all day. It's what we're all fascinated by in the news. The vast majority of people haven't got a clue what's going on in terms of vast majority of these stories. They haven't heard of any of these people. They don't know about the policies. Winter fuel allowance is the single cut-through policy. So let's talk about this, any sort of, whether they means test it, whether they U-turn it. At the end of the day, the Chancellor, H. Reeves, came up with this idea, a mad policy in my view, came up with this idea as a way of helping to balance the books. Didn't balance the books. She's got talking about cutting some disability payments. And again, it should be cutting your access to disability payments, not the actual payments to people who need them. But all of this is about balancing the books. She hasn't balanced the books. She's going to have to go much further and faster. But none of these policies are going to be popular with the vast majority of people.
And it's that basic lack of political nous which has dogged this government from day one. The thing about something like winter fuel payments, this is something that basically Treasury mandarins have wanted to do for a very long time. They just don't understand it. They think it's obviously not great for the old balance sheet.
But the solution was really simple, wasn't it? You just put it on, so it can be taxed. If you're a higher earner, so my parents who are well off pensioners, they're from that generation that did very well, nicely well, but so they'll get taxed on it. So fine.
But it's one of those things where, again, if you had any sense to you, as you would come up with a solution like that, or you'd suggest we can't do it in the way that you're prescribing. But again, Rachel Reeves come in, sort of Treasury orthodoxy is wonderful, let's embrace everything they say, and you end up with a disaster like this. Again, they just don't seem to understand. I think because largely I think they're playing to often sections of the media, or often what they see as a
Labour
kind of
Party conference.
Labour Party conference to an extent, but also just a kind of general public perception. Labour's problem is that we're not seen as sensible on finances, so we need to overcompensate to such a degree that actually looks quite mean-spirited.
We'll overcompensate by cutting money to some of the poorest elderly people in the country, and we think that'll play well.
If you want to prove yourself to be fiscally competent, just be fiscally competent. You don't have to engage in these kind of theatrics and these kind of blunt instrument policies in order to get that across the line. But also, if you think about, and again, it's one of those things when people talk about the austerity under the Tory Lib Dem coalition in 2010 to 2015, how unpopular that was. Well, apart from the fact that the Tories got re-elected with a majority in 2015, that's how unpopular it was. British people aren't stupid. I mean, again, look, people like to vote for. Yeah, I want more spent on the 10 things I care about, and I don't want to be taxed anymore. Tax someone over there. Yeah, I mean, everyone's we all want a free pass, don't we? But people get that you need money to pay for things, and if there isn't enough money, you're not going to get those things. It does feel like we're probably in a slightly different era now because of the fact that those coalition and then Conservative governments did not deliver the economic gains that we did not recover from 2008 properly. Then we were hit by
productivity,
by COVID, lockdowns, war. The combination of all those things, I think, makes the politics of belt tightening a lot more difficult in this current era.
I think you'll find, if you check more closely, that actually it's all the fault of Brexit.
No, exactly.
Did you not get that memo?
A bit more friction at the border has been the problem rather than the war and pestilence and disease.
That's been the issue. Yeah. Shutting down the entire economy for a year and a half, absolutely not the issue. Having to fill out some forms at the EU border, absolutely the issue. I have to say, though, having been away for the weekend, I'm quite happy to queue. solid, but it's just like when you see like you've got sort of 10 passport officers completely, no one at the gates. Oh yeah, EU through. Yeah, everyone arriving on this plane is British, and we're all queuing up. You just think, really? And we let them through our gates?
Yeah.
Just saying, it's just bloody mindedness. But I will take the queue. By the way, we always used to have to queue before. By the way,
it's a small price for freedom.
It is a small price, but it is. Do you have a British passport? Yes, I'm proud of it, I say. And everyone looks at me like, yeah, very well. Anyway, so the visa crackdown's not going to work. Rethinking winter fuel doesn't work for the Labour Party. What about Kemi Badenoch? What can she do? Is it over for her? The Spectator's deputy editor, Freddie Gray, seemed to think it was already over. Tory MPs talking about ousting her. They were already talking about her lasting a second set of local elections. They knew these ones would be bad. They came from a high water mark in 2021. They were particularly bad. Reform's threat is not just to the Tories, though. It's to Labour as well. I think I'm in that difficult thing was that I think I rate Kemi Badenoch. I think she's been right about a lot of things. She's spoken out on a lot of issues, and she raised questions about net zero. She just didn't sort of play along on the trans madness and things like that. But completely quiet on lockdown. That is a big black mark against her. Like, where were you on lockdown? A lot of people say she's lazy. They say this idea that she thinks she's got a few years before to come up with policies, that she isn't taking the fight to reform. She's too wary of what she seems to be upsetting people in central office in terms of, actually getting people to be motivated in campaign. Is the problem Kemi Badenoch? Is it policies? Is it the fact that no one wants the Tory party back right now after 14 years in power, in which case it doesn't matter if, Jesus Christ himself was leading the Tory party, he wouldn't be voted for?
I mean, it is worth remembering just how historic that defeat was last time around. I mean, this was unprecedented in the history of the modern Conservative Party. It was humbling to end all humblings for them. I mean, it was really quite tremendous. So anyone who inherited that kind of poison chalice, it was always going to be difficult. At the same time, I don't think even they were caught slightly unawares by how much Reform could continue to capitalise on their gains at the election and essentially assert themselves in terms of vote share, in terms of the media narrative, as the opposition, even though they've only got a handful of MPs still. That is something that has completely caught the Conservatives unawares, and it has really confronted them with the clear possibility that the next election they are displaced as the main party on the right of British politics. So this is something which it's not clear to me that any of certainly the candidates who were running last time around could have got any further. I think this is a brand that is really in the doldrums and needs to be brought back up again. But they're just not even getting any political oxygen at the moment. And yes, you can claim that's because they haven't been picking the right issues, they're not going on the attack in the right way, but also because momentum is a hell of a thing. Reform have it. Where in the same way that Boris Johnson managed to kind of keep Reform in its box, those things have completely flipped now in terms of appealing to those Brexity voters. That's just becomes a kind of irresistible force.
And Nigel Farage, that whole line, well, if you vote Reform, you'll get Labour. If you vote Reform, you'll get the Conservatives. So, don't vote Reform. Don't do your little protest vote. And when it turned around with Reform, not only winning a load of council seats, but coming second in a huge number as well, taking control of 10 councils. And this idea that actually, in this piece that Nigel Farage wrote at the weekend, basically saying, if you vote Conservative, you will actually get Labour, and if you vote Labour, you will get Conservative. If you want vote Reform, you have to vote Reform. I mean, this is going to be a very, very, very powerful message, isn't it? It's interesting also, again, Nigel Farage, again, I'm totally allied with him on this in terms of the net zero madness, and we had Rich Tyson on the show many times as well. Brits overwhelmingly are on board on this now, 6 out of 10 in a new poll suggesting that basically, cutting the cost of living needs to come ahead of net zero drives and eco-friendliness and all that nonsense. Echoing, Tony Blair, now David Blunkett, by all accounts, Ed Miliband's just sacked Dame Mary Archer because she was sort of agreed with Tony Blair. Now, that lot, they aren't going far enough. They're going, oh, well, obviously climate change is a big issue. Obviously, we need to deal with it, but this isn't how we deal with it. No, I don't even think it's something to worry about. I think it's something that we will adapt to and technology will deal with, and we will come up with some cleaner energy at some point. Great, but absolutely we don't sacrifice our cost of living, and certainly we don't sacrifice the ability of the non-industrialised world to actually their ability to industrialise and improve their lives and literally save their lives and prolong their lives by using fossil fuels. But it's interesting how quickly that tide has turned. Those polls for years saying, oh, it's in the top 3 issues, people really care about the environment. No, they don't want people littering in their street or leaving their bins out. That's not what they mean. But actually, when you tell people this is what it's going to cost you and it's costing you billions, but we're going to cut the winter fuel for your auntie or your gran, people say, you know what, no thank you. And
it's been like this for a long time. I mean, you poll people, do you like the environment, do you want it to be looked after? Of course, most people are going to say yes. You say, OK, would you be willing for your family to have to pay XYZ cost in order to get there? Say, well, of course not.
Or limit the number of flights you can take.
And that's not selfish. The whole point of politics, really, the whole kind of basis of the contract between politicians and the public is that we will make sure that your lives get better, that your kids will be able to live a better life than you have, etc., etc. Environmentalism flipped all that on its head. It was like, sorry, the deal's off because there's this abstract issue that we need to deal with, and actually we're going to impoverish ourselves and it won't make the blindest bit of difference.
But not only your kids not going to have a better life than you're not going to have a better life than your grandparents. You're going to go back to pre-industrial levels of life. I mean, that's what people don't understand.
And this is one thing that Blair, I don't want to say to his credit because it's a bit late in the day, but pointed to. It's also saying explicitly you've got to fly less, you've got to enjoy yourself less. This is really important. I mean, the idea that this kind of hair shirt sort of approach to politics was ever going to last, and I think it was one thing where in slightly better times it was a luxury that Western countries could kind of afford.
People can play along
to an extent. That's not true anymore.
No, absolutely not.
And voters are starting to notice how the cost of these things in a way that they haven't done previously.
Oh, absolutely. And again, like, oh, well, you're spending money on sending billions over there, but you're putting money on my bills. Absolutely bad. And the numbers people are putting to us, it's a couple of £100 a year. Like, no, it's not. This is going to cost us trillions. It's absolute madness, the whole thing. One thing I haven't got to, and I want to, and again, we were hoping to have actually spoken to Tim Montgomery on the show, who was involved in this. This is Radio 4. Any questions? Sort of a big BBC show, the radio equivalent of the Question Time. And it was an extraordinary comment that Lucy Powell, the leader of the House of Commons, made when Tim Montgomery, who's set up Conservative Home, defected to Reform Party some months ago. He said, I don't know if you saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs. It was on last Wednesday night. And as he said it, he was interrupted by Lucy Powell, and she said, oh, we want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Oh, yeah, OK, let's get that dog whistle out. Now, you could feel even, and I know the audience is on these programmes because I've done them a lot of time, you could feel the audience go, oh, she's been criticised. Many have said she has now apologised. Oh, don't want people to misinterpret. People are saying she should be sacked from her job for this. Again, I'm not sure everyone needs to be sacked and, ousted from public life saying this, but that was a betrayal of a Labour Party view on this, wasn't it? This idea that when anyone mentions, when we talked about immigration earlier, or the grooming gang scandal was not looked into because of an issue over race and immigration. That's why it wasn't looked into in protecting people and don't want to be called a bigot by saying maybe it's not a good idea we allow white working class girls to be abused en masse by largely Pakistani heritage men in Labour-controlled towns and cities around the country, which is a fair summary of what happened for 20 years and is still happening now. But do you think that she kind of gave the game away into that she's still using this phrase dog whistle? Because to a certain extent, she's just echoing what Keir Starmer has to say in terms of the Southport tax and things like that actually they do think of these things as just dog whistle issues.
No, absolutely. The mask slipped there. I don't think there's any other explanation for it, not least because all of the other evidence. I mean, we've got this horrendous dog whistle comment talking about the industrial scale rape of some of the most vulnerable poor and working class girls in society. To call that as a dog whistle, I think is utterly despicable. We of course had Keir Starmer saying that when Robert Jenrick was calling for a national inquiry into grooming gangs, he was jumping on a far right bandwagon. Again, you can qualify these things after the point and say, I was talking about this politician. People hear the same smear job that they've heard so many times over the years. And then there was that leaked Home Office report, which yes, it was the officials and whatnot, but they said that the grooming gangs is part of a hard right extreme narrative. So it's one of those things where the fact that they keep having to walk these comments back at least shows that they realise they're on the wrong side of the public.
But it is what they think.
And this is another thing, particularly for Labour, the places where this took place are Labour areas, councils which were run by Labour up until quite recently, MPs in those seats. And what happened internally, and in terms of the national conversation, where you had many Labour officials and figures suggesting that this was far-right bandwagon, that this was a dog whistle, and as a consequence of that, they essentially, run interference for all the more horrendous failures that happen by a lot of their own people on the ground. They can't continue to talk like that.
But also mentioning a documentary about one of the most serious sort of mass crimes in this country's history. Labour banged on about Adolescence, a fictional drama on Netflix,
which they kept calling a documentary.
Keir Starmer a couple of times called it a documentary. Talking in Parliament about it, talking about how wanting to show it to MPs, showing it in every school. I mean, by the way, I had a 15+. I'm not sure you can show it to many kids in schools. By the way, I'd rather my kids were being taught something than watching a fictional drama. Just extraordinary. Bang on about that. Not remotely, by the way, in any way sort of, a representative of knife crime at all. And a big fuss being made by the BBC about how Kemi Badenoch hadn't seen the Netflix documentary. I mean, again, I've done it, Netflix drama. But it's a dog whistle to talk about the grooming scandal. Just extraordinary, it really is. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 11:25 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, and then we could get to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Can't wait to hear from you. This is Talk.
That jobs, well-paying jobs, are at stake, and that they are being destroyed by the drive towards net zero. And you're of course absolutely right, the jobs that will be created from net zero won't be in Britain, they'll be in China, as has happened. We've seen that with the solar industry. It's a huge Chinese industry now, not a job here from making solar PV panels.
It seems to me, around the world, the lure of trying to be sort of morally self-righteous and go hard and fast for net zero is beginning to wane.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Andrew Fox, also going to be talking to the leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. You don't want to miss that about the public basically going, no, we want to worry about the cost of living, not your mad climate fantasies. That's going to be lively. First up, though, let's get to your calls, which will also likely to be lively, looking at some of the people on the line. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Lots of texts and tweets coming in as well about Labour. This immigration visa crackdown, and possibly a U-turn on winter fuel allowance in the wake of those disastrous local election results for both Labour and the Tories. What's your reaction? Will that be enough to win back votes? Bob says, so they don't actually want a visa clampdown, it's just so they don't lose votes. I mean, Yeah, Bob, fair summary. John says too little too late. Does he not understand we can see what he's done, what he's doing, and who for, need I say more, he says. Michelle says nothing will bring votes back. Labour has caused catastrophic damage to this country. They're disgraceful. And Callum says it's not considering a U-turn. Their stance is the same. Let's go to Steve, who's on the line in Kent. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
Hello, what do you want to say?
Basically, I just want to say that both Labour and Tory party are afflicted by the same problems. Which part of them do you get? You vote Labour. Are you voting Union Labour, Green, Net Zero Labour, LGBTQ Labour, minority ethnics Labour? They can't make a policy that fits their own vote base, let alone one that fits the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And then the Tories are afflicted with the same issue.
Yeah.
Some of them want Brexit, some of them didn't want Brexit. The ones that wanted it were the figureheads who were held back by the backroom people. Yeah. Nobody trusts whoever's in charge.
But that said, we're often told, but these are the Conservatives in particular. It's a broad tent, but there comes a point when it's like a canvas marquee the whole way down the mall, and actually the people at one end and the people at the other end completely disagree on everything.
Well, that's right. I mean, I'm a small business owner. So was my father. I've been Tory boy my entire life. And I'm absolutely disgusted with the betrayal over Brexit. So I personally could never vote Tory again. And I'm sure there are an awful lot of Tory voters who
When you say the betrayal over Brexit, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, they got the mandate when UKIP stood down and gave them a clear majority to do the job properly. And I feel it's been done in name only. They've not taken advantage of anything.
They don't really believe in it?
No, absolutely not. They've squandered a fabulous opportunity to make Britain great and reform. On the other hand, are singing one song. All the other parties are singing multiples of songs in some kind of barbershop harmony that doesn't rhyme.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. Great analogy to be stolen by a columnist soon. Steve, thank you for that. Really appreciate that. Georgina's on the line. She's in London. Very good morning to you, Georgina.
Good morning, you little ray of sunshine, you. I've been listening to everyone talking and everything going on. Do you know, Julia, I've actually lost the will to live.
So is that just our show?
No, darling, it's everything that's going on in the world at the moment. I mean, I don't know that Keir Starmer actually realises that he's only in office because there was no other option, and the electorate were desperate to rid themselves of the Conservatives. He definitely doesn't get it. He's betrayed and lost the trust of the British electorate. Starmer has shown himself to be totally incompetent on every level, not knowing what a woman was a corker for me. Even when problems are pointed out, spelled out, showed to him by the voting public, he carries on full steam ahead with his exceedingly unpopular policies. Where is the mentality in that? He takes no accountability for his actions. He just buries his head in the sand, hoping it's all going to go away. And it won't. Yeah. We need a Prime Minister, Julia, who has the courage of his convictions to say it, stand by it, and then go forth and do it.
It doesn't seem so much to ask, does it? It just doesn't. Whenever I hear about a politician, doesn't matter which party it is, they're like, well, we've listened to the voters, so now we're going to change that policy that we were absolutely steadfast on 5 minutes ago. I was thinking, well, then, did you never really believe in it? Because if you really believe in it, you should stick hard on it.
Absolutely spot on. You know, we need a Prime Minister who prioritises his own people before illegal immigrants. We need a Prime Minister who genuinely cares about our veterans, our elderly, our disabled, and above all, our children, our most vulnerable in society. A Prime Minister we can be proud of, and my darling, that is not Keir Starmer.
I don't think she's going to be on Keir Starmer's Christmas card list. Georgina, thank you for that. Always lovely to talk to you. Thomas, these are all very, very valid points. Is there anybody working in Number 10 or in the Tory Central Office who is telling these party leaders these things? Because I do wonder, I mean, that's one of the things about Keir Starmer. It's not only incompetent policies a lot of the time, we'll pay off the unions here, but we'll take money from poor pensioners here. Like, they're not even appealing to their own party members and party voters. But their handling of things PR-wise, you mentioned the free gear Keir and all of that stuff, plus the two-tier stuff and accusing basically everyone of being far right who's concerned about the Southport rights. They get things, even the most basic stuff, really wrong.
No, exactly, and it's hilarious because they were packaging themselves, weren't they, as we are the grown-ups coming back into the room, we are the kind of the heirs to Blair. I mean, say what you will about Tony Blair, he at least could communicate a line very, very well. I mean, this is one of his great strengths. Keir Starmer, I mean, I doze off when he starts speaking. I mean, I always say I have to tape. If he's only got a big set speech or conference, press conference, I always have to put on the Sky Plus box so I can watch it back, because 3 minutes in, I'm watching it, I think I'm listening to it, it just goes in and goes out again. It just melts on, contact with your eardrums. It's amazing because everything is so wispy, meaningless, sound-bitten, cliche-ridden. And it's because there's no politics, there's no substance. He doesn't really believe in very much. So aside from anything else, just even being able to craft a message. I mean, the last time he tried to craft a message, he went on that bizarre ramble about how he's got these milestones which he's going to meet, and they're on top of the pillars which are on top of the foundation stone which are on,
I mean,
somewhere
genuinely,
in Norfolk.
do not let that man build bridges ever, because they would be very dangerous.
What are the milestones doing on the pillars, kid? Do you know? I don't know. Like, that's his idea of messaging, and you just think even on the most basic level.
Someone found a metaphor, and they on AI, and they mixed it up. 11:35 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about the threat from Russia, what Israel is doing in Gaza, and indeed what Hamas are doing in Gaza as well. We're going to be talking to Andrew Fox coming up just up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. For me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:37 is the time. Delighted to welcome Andrew Fox to the show, defence expert and research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Very good morning to you, Andrew.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. A bit of a worrying front page of the one of the papers today, Telegraph, about the threat from Russia and the idea that the government has been basically getting, basically reviewing the threat, their contingency plans for an attack from Russia. It's 20 years old, and they're going to get that up to date. First of all, is there a massive threat from Russia in terms of to our nation state as opposed to our allies and our interests? And B, why on earth is that plan still sitting there 20 years old and no one's updated it yet?
Well, we've taken our eye off the ball on Russia for decades, clearly. After 9/11, we were absolutely absorbed into conflicts in the Middle East and Afghanistan. We reformatted basically the entire British Army to fight those conflicts. That then was followed by significant budget cuts, and the army hasn't, particularly the army hasn't really recovered from that period of fighting wars of choice in dusty foreign lands. So there's obviously a huge awakening with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and everything that's gone on there. We've seen huge evolutions on the battlefield with the use of drones and the way that artillery and various other assets have been used. People believe that tank battles were a thing of the past, and all of a sudden we're seeing heavy metal fighting in Ukraine. So there's been a very swift change in that paradigm almost, and the MOD is phenomenally slow. It's the traditional turning an oil tanker. So this stuff does take time, unfortunately, and it's something we've been sleeping on. And when it comes to a direct Russian threat to the UK, not specifically right now, they're not going to be pouring Russian troops over the channel. But the way Russia fights is cleverer than that. And the way they always start. And we've got great examples of how they do this from Georgia, from Ukraine in previous conflicts, from Transnistria, is how they start with subversive activities. They start with sabotage, with undercover attacks, with significant cyber and information operations, and that progresses to what was called the Little Green Men strategy, where they eventually start sending troops over the border under a false flag or under the guise of civilian mercenaries. And only then, as we saw in Ukraine just years ago, is that escalation to an actual military invasion. And
this is what the Baltic states are so fearful of course.
And that was my exact next point, is that it's not the threat to the UK that's the issue, it's the threat to the Baltics and the Balkans as well, of course, with their strong connections to Serbia. Bosnia still is a country under tension with the various ethnicities they've got there. There's plenty of flashpoints around that Western Russian flank.
Yep.
And we're allied with those countries. So if they go to war, they're in NATO, and that means that we're at war as well.
Yeah, and again, reality check, everybody. Or are we just not going to actually honour any of our international treaty agreements? Again, we do actually have a treaty which we wanted to protect the sovereign nation state of Ukraine, which apparently lots of people have conveniently forgotten. Again, I don't think anyone's expecting Russia to be attacking us, as you say, rolling the tanks in on the boats across the channel. But we know we've been under attack. I mean, goodness me, we've had this, terror attacks, with poisons, on British streets on a number of occasions, blatant open attacks. Those would be considered acts of war by many other nation states. And of course, the cyber stuff and an awful lot of the stuff that's going on online are definitely behind. Now, the other threat that we've known about for quite some time, and particularly in the news over the weekend, was this Iranian threat and the arrest of 5 suspects, one now believed to have been very close, very well connected to the Iranian regime. We're talking about an attack on a specific site. We don't have any more information about who these men are and what the site was. What do you suspect this sort of plot would have been involving, though?
I mean, from everything we've read, it sounds like an attack on some kind of major event. And of course, the short notice we're talking about, the VE Day celebrations, would have been the obvious high-profile target. And if you look at the images that have been released from the raids, you can clearly see military patterned uniforms, which means either the SAS or SBS were involved. They're usually only called out when it is an imminent threat. Counter-terrorism police firearms officers are normally more than able to cope with these threats in kind of a more slow-paced environment. If special forces are getting pushed out, that means there was something imminent on the horizon. So the best guess would be some kind of VE Day event, if not the main event in London.
Which would have been an extraordinary sort of coup in terms of that for the Iran. Now, but again, Iran are facing a very questionable future after the incredible ability of Israel to break down a lot of their ability to attack Israel and perpetrate sort of terror attacks around the Middle East. Again, talk about even the Americans getting involved with not an attack, not invasion of Iran, but certainly depleting their nuclear ability or capability in the future. One would be, on one level, surprised that the Iranians would risk such a terror attack if there were links to the Revolutionary Guard in Iran.
Yeah, well, it's about deniability, and that's the issue here. Is it's not a clearly uniformed, obvious state threat. Someone who is connected to the Iranian regime is still nevertheless deniable. They can accuse them of being a rogue actor or whatever. And also, you've got to think about the audience they're playing to as well, because there's a lot of unrest in Iran. They're clearly weakened from the last 20 months of operations, where their proxy strategy, their ring of fire around Israel has failed. So it would make sense that they would try and strike a blow, especially in the context of the talks they're having with the Americans at the moment and the very obvious military threat they're under of reprisal strikes.
Well, indeed. Well, in terms of reprisal strikes, let's talk about Israel. Again, that extraordinary attack on Hezbollah's ability, funded by the Iranian regime, to attack in Israel. But the agreement by the Israel Security Cabinet to a plan to expand their military offensive against Hamas, calling up reservists en masse and basically heading into more parts of Gaza and effectively displacing 2 million people, Palestinians there, and to all intents and purposes holding the territory once again. Now, of course, they withdrew from the territory back in 2005. Go, off you go, fill your boots, have your Palestinian territory. Didn't work out so well for either the Palestinian people or indeed certainly the people of Israel hurt in that horrific massacre on October the 7th. There's, the usual suspects in uproar about this, but this is pretty much what any nation state would do who suffered an attack as they did on October the 7th. Inability to oust Hamas in any other way. They cannot leave Hamas in power in the Gaza Strip, can they?
It's a really tricky one. The plan they've announced was pretty much yesterday to fully reoccupy the Gaza Strip. They've been trailing it since February. I was over there in February and IDF officers were openly talking about the fact that this was something that was on the cards. It is a huge undertaking. If they go for a full enduring military operation, that is a very, very long operation. It's not going to be over quickly. It's going to be very expensive in terms of blood and treasure. Yep. And it's going to have to be planned very carefully, because we've seen what happens when you effectively go into a regime change, nation building operation. We've seen that in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah. How well that's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, we know there are tactics that don't work. We know that, and it's even harder for Israel because they've got no partner force like we had in Iraq and Afghanistan. They've got certainly no permissive locals who are remotely friendly to any kind of Israeli administration. Yeah. So it's going to be a very hard undertaking. And part of me wonders if this is just another escalatory measure, which they will follow through with. But you'll notice they put a timeline on it. They said 16th of May at the end of Trump's visit is the decision. That's the deadline for Hamas to make a hostage deal. Yeah. For the last 2 months, we've seen Israel squeezing Hamas and putting that pressure on, piling it on, killing their commanders, removing their capabilities. And now they've got a very hard deadline where they face losing absolutely everything. Yeah. If Israel roll in. So we might well see Hamas lean towards making a deal. We might, yeah. We've still got a couple of dozen Israeli hostages believed to still be alive. Andrew Fox, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much. Just a quick word from Tom Slater, just on Israel, IDF and this proposed plan. No, as ever, it's hard to kind of determine what this is signalling as part of a kind of broader negotiation. How much of this is also signalling to the kind of right of the coalition in the government in order to kind of keep those people on board. It's still a very fragile government in so many respects. Or is this a kind of opening gambit, as Andrew was saying there, about trying to get these negotiations back on track? Domestically in Israel, there is still a lot of anger about not bringing the hostages home. Yeah. The fact that the former ceasefire process has broken down, is that going to become a consideration? As ever, we've got to kind of work out the signal from the noise, but it's very early days when it comes to something like this. Absolutely. Well, again, I would have thought protecting from future attacks has got to be the number one issue. But, the hostage issues, no man or woman left behind is such a key issue for Israel, isn't it? Love to hear your thoughts on this and all the things we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we'll take a quick break. Then we're going to be hearing from the leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. Is the whole push for net zero finally over? 6 out of 10 voters say, nah. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
You know, there's an important point about justice being seen to be done. And I think the major problem we have with the integration tribunals at the moment is that justice is rarely seen to be done. We see all these crazy-looking decisions coming out of the tribunal, and anyone who wants to understand them has to read through a 40-page case decision. It shouldn't be this complicated. We have spent the last sort of 4 or 5 decades wrapping this issue up, or issues around asylum and immigration, in lots and lots of really complicated law.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:50 is the time. Well, a new poll, it's in the Sun newspaper, shows that the Prime Minister's climate change drive, spearheaded by the one and only Ed Miliband, is basically not very popular with voters. I know, I'm as surprised as you are. 6 out of 10 voters, according to a new poll, say, we don't think you should be prioritising tackling net zero over and above tackling the cost of living. Of course, we all know that tackling climate change and net zero policies are what costing people money, not helping them get more money in their bank accounts, in their wallets. Not only have we seen Ed Miliband sack one of his key advisors, Dame Mary Archers, apparently, who agreed with what Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, had to say the other week when he said, actually, net zero as a target isn't going to work, it's unachievable and the like. But now David Blunkett, the former Home Secretary as well, has got on board. Oh, everyone's late to this party. I started the party a long time back off. Well, a very different party is the Climate Party. Leader Ed Gemmell, I'm glad to say, joins us in the studio once again. Ed Gemmell, it's all over, mate. Climate change, net zero, all your eco concerns. Voters don't care. They care about the pound in their pocket, paying their bills, and frankly, net zero can do one.
I mean, total load of tosh. I mean, you get with Tony Blair and all these others, they're drinking that reformulated Kool-Aid. I mean, and absolutely, they've taken it hook, line and sinker. It's rubbish. I mean, the survey, to be honest, if you go out and say to somebody, do you want me to deal with your house price and your cost of living, or do you want me to deal with anything else? They'll always say, deal with the things that cost me first. And if it had been comparison with investing in art, investing in the roads, investing in anything else, they'd still have said, deal with my cost of living problem first and we'll deal with the other things later. So it's not
problem with your microphone. I think we can hear you again. Can you just double check that it's sort of squidged? Okay, right. Polly, I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I was going to sort of a note to my carry on.
Should I be repeating?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Right. Okay, that's fine. And then coming on, the biggest way to beat the cost of living crisis, of course, is to build the economy. We've got to go out there, grow the
green
economy,
revolution,
and get money.
all those jobs, 500,000. We were told by all the eco fanatics.
500,000 maybe projections for the future, but we've already got them in the economy already. I mean, we've seen
those people working fossil fuels.
And look, we've seen that figure recently that's been banded around. It makes me laugh every time I read it. About £4 billion is the cost of us to do this during this year. God, wow, what a lot of money. And yet
it's not £4 billion. That's the point. This is absolute load of I'm trying to think of a polite word, nonsense.
Well, that was in the newspapers today.
It's in the newspapers. It must be true. I mean, if we read it on the BBC, then 100% to be true. Let's get BBC Verify onto this. The point is, these policies were all signed up to without any proper scrutiny by the public, by MPs, even by the Treasury. They didn't do a cost-benefit analysis. Where did we hear that before? Lockdown. Oh, yeah, that worked out so well, didn't it? About, the trillion. They reckoned it was £1 trillion by 2050. In fact, it's dwarfed that if we actually were able to achieve it. We're not. You know as well as I do that the British public happy to play along when things are OK. Things are not OK. When you are worrying about putting food on the table, paying your heating bill, paying your rent, paying your mortgage, and paying to run your car, and then you've got a government that is sending off billions to the third world to help pay for their issues, is paying for wind turbines. We've got Spain and Portugal, because of renewable policy, basically having a 24-hour blackout. Fine for them. It was in spring. It was it started in daylight hours. What if that happened to us in the middle of November or January on a cold winter's night? Come on.
You jumped on the
people are simply not. No, the whole point is all of these policies, people are not willing to play along with the madness anymore.
Because
they weren't signed up to it in the first place, and they're not willing to play along with it any longer.
But people have got to see through all the stuff that comes both in the media and in politics, which is shading and shrouding the issue. The issue is that net zero is making us a hell of a lot of money. I mean, 83 billion is the net zero economy last year, based on the CBI figures, and it grew at 9%, whereas our own economy grew at under 1%. It makes us money.
What do you mean that economy grew?
But Julia, one second.
What do you mean? What are you contrasting?
So in other words, those jobs within sustainability and everything else, and all the supply lines that go into them, are making vast amounts of money. And if you want to beat a cost of living crisis, one of those things you want, of course, is a better paying job. Those better paying jobs are getting 15% more on average than jobs in the UK.
People working as net zero officers in the NHS. Brilliant.
No.
The jobs are in China, mate. They're using coal-fired factories to make all of the wind turbines and all of the solar panels that are now ruining our countryside and costing us twice as much in electricity.
So we should make them here.
Because we have to have the backup of nuclear and gas.
So we should make them here. We should do it here, not do it in China.
Why can't we do it here? Why? You know why we can't.
Because we've offshored it for 50, 60 years.
Why have we offshored it? Because the energy costs are so high. That's the reason why.
The energy cost, that was just debunked on another TV station, actually, recently. But right in front of Kemi Badenoch, and she was actually showing why our energy prices are so high. They're high because of the cost of gas. And before you give it to me, let me go into one. Let's go into this North Sea oil and gas thing, which often comes up actually when I've talked to you before. You know, North Sea oil and gas, if we go and drill more for there, it isn't going to make anything cheaper in this country. Why? Because if I was drilling or you were drilling in the North Sea, we're not going to sell it cheap to Britain. We're going to want to get the best price we can, which means it's going to be based on international prices, and we're going to sell it where we can get the money back.
However, okay, A, you can tax it, and B, as we saw with America, people say, well, it won't make any difference. This is what Ed Miliband was saying. It won't make any difference to the cost of international prices because it's a global price. And yet, isn't it funny how we have higher prices here than America does, which fracks and drills for oil and drills for gas, drill, baby, drill. Why would we have a policy where we have to rely on unreliable renewables, not drilling for oil and gas in the North Sea, not fracking for the gas underneath our own feet, but at the same time saying, oh, but when we don't have enough wind and we don't have enough sun, what we're going to do is we're going to take electricity from Norway. What does Norway do? They drill for oil and gas in the North Sea.
Right. But hang on, we know that the pricing is actually based on the price of gas. Now, we could break that.
We could
decide. So government could decide, as you say, with regulation, with policy, with tariffs, with tax, it could decide to break that, and subsidies. And what it could do is say, when all those renewables are coming out at a much cheaper price, let's have them at that price, and let's pay that there, and
but
then
they're not
the gas.
Cheaper, they're all subsidised. You know they're subsidised. Plus the small matter of when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, we still need to have energy, or we're all just going to agree that we can't put the kettle on a cold winter's night in December. But because we accept that we don't want to have blackouts, we have to have the backup. If you have a backup, you're basically having double the cost of energy.
But what we should have been doing for the last 30 or 40 years, of course, is doing tidal power. We could be doing 20 gigawatts, 60% of our power at peak from tidal power. And we haven't been doing it.
Okay,
and if we'd had when that Ukraine war came, we'd have been making a load of money exporting all the energy rather than importing it.
That's great. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. But we haven't. At the end of the day,
we should start now.
Look, I'm quite happy for us to have sustainable renewables that work, but they have to work, and they have to work enough of the time and all of the time. But at the end of the day, the policies that the Climate Party pushes, that the Green Party pushes, that Labour, a lot of the Tory Party, and others, a lot of these policies, they are not based on the reality that there is no economy in the world and no economy in the history of the world that can actually see growth and see improvements for their people unless they have cheap, affordable, reliable, sustainable energy.
There is growth in the world. McKinsey's projection is 12 trillion in the net zero and sustainability economy in 2030.
It's a Ponzi scheme,
it's vast. It's not a Ponzi scheme. It's happening through everything: building, transport, vehicles,
well, if you put into
energy.
law that you can't do anything without doing all the eco stuff, and everyone has to sign up and have a net zero officer, then we can create those jobs. They're not manufacturing jobs, and they're not going to keep the lights on.
But what they do is they bring prices down, number one. They make it easier for people, and they make profits and create jobs.
Even Ed Miliband, who promised our energy bills would go down by £300
but he can't
a year,
promise
even
it unless
he
we
now
break
says
the
they
connection.
won't go down.
They've
gone up by £300 a year.
But we have to break the connection to gas. It requires policy change.
That's not the only solution.
It's the number one change. Gas, the price of gas is by far the biggest part of our energy costs at the moment. Break that. costs will come down. And then we can also
cost
see...
for electricity, but we still need gas and other fossil fuels for 80% of our electricity, of our energy needs.
But that's while we're innovating. You know, steel. We need to start using H2 hydrogen in steel.
We are not going to hit net zero targets, whether they're 2030 or 2050.
Which will cost us.
Come back on again. Time is against us. This is Talk with the Home of Common Sense.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, great to have your company. Great to also have the company still of Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, who's with us in the studio. Was just there with a conversation with Ed Gemmell of the Climate Party. Going to get your reaction. I know you wanted to come in on that. But we're also going to be talking more about the Home Office and their plan to restrict work and study visa applications from countries with the worst record of overstaying and claiming asylum miraculously at the end of that visa. This is under new plans for a Labour crackdown on abuses of the system. In particular, it would be targeting Pakistanis, Nigerians and Sri Lankans. Will that be enough, though, in the wake of those disastrous local election results for Labour to basically sort of win those voters back? Also, I mean, there's lots of talk about a U-turn on winter fuel payments. Do you think that would make a difference? Plus, local authorities under the control of Reform UK, and 10 councils now are under control of Reform UK, will only be allowed to fly the Union flag and the St George's Cross and no other flags. That's what the party chairman Zia Youssef has announced. The policy has already come under fire from Labour, who've said it would mean a ban on the display of Ukrainian flags from public buildings. Yeah, but if we could just get rid of the rainbow flag from public buildings, that would work for me. It's a price worth paying. Plus, more events taking place throughout this week to mark 80 years since World War II ended in Europe. Street and tea parties took place across the country yesterday, of course, on the worst day of the bank holiday, is always the case, including at Buckingham Palace and at Downing Street. And that amazing fly past as well. Of course, we've got the King and the Queen visiting those amazing ceramic poppy displays at the Tower of London, which look just over the river from where we are in the studio here. Plus, Labour is at risk of taxing British high streets out of existence. The Chancellor has been warned. Alex Riley, the chair of the newly formed High Street Regeneration Group, said the Chancellor's raid on employers was harming job creation and risk triggering more closures of shops and restaurants. Not sure we can get any more than that. I think virtually every high street now is just either boarded up stores, betting shops and charity shops. Anyway, all that coming up. I'd love to hear from you in terms of those disastrous local election results for the Tories and for Labour. Labour talking about this immigration visa crackdown, a U-turn possibly being mooted on the winter fuel allowance, some sort of change there. Lots of pressure on Kemi Badenoch from her own MPs on her future. What's your reaction to that? Is any of that changing the Tory leader, changing the Labour leader, changing Labour policies? Is that going to be enough to win back votes from Reform? Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. Just a couple of moments, we're going to be talking to a brand new Reform councillor. First up, though, so Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, still with us. I know you want to come in on net zero. You and I have banged on about this issue for a very long time. Ed Gemmell from the Climate Party, lovely man, always great to have him in the studio. I mean, you always say kind of go hammer and tongs at it. But I genuinely am of the view that, you know, no matter how nice people are and well-meaning, that the net zero policy is genuinely insane and immoral and unachievable. I mean, you know, and unaffordable. I mean, you name it. There's no other extra words I can use about it. I think it's such bad policy. I don't believe in the foundational belief of it. I don't believe in that as a solution. I don't think it's achievable. I don't think it's affordable. But it's interesting, this poll, 6 out of 10 voters basically say, can you prioritise dealing with the cost of living rather than these net zero targets? But 'twas ever thus, wasn't it? Nothing's really changed. It's just politicians have had to wake up to that.
No, absolutely. And the politics in this is shifting very quickly in a way that could be interesting if anyone can actually seize the initiative, because for so long there has been this completely uncracked elite consensus, you know, something they all agree on but everyone else wasn't necessarily privy to, that we've got to pursue net zero, that it doesn't matter that it's going to impoverish people, that this is for the greater good and so on and so forth. All of that is now colliding with kind of economic reality and public opinion in a way that we haven't seen previously. This particular poll saying that 59% of Brits think that you've got to prioritise cost of living over the environment, only 13% saying that you should do things the other way around. This has been true for some time. You've now got the union starting to speak up about this a lot more because of the fact that if Ed Miliband gets his way and basically makes it impossible to do any more exploration in the North Sea for oil and gas, that's going to be a kind of Thatcher-style pit closure moment for jobs in this country. And you're also seeing other governments starting to say, what the hell is countries like the UK doing? The Norwegian energy minister gave an interview to the British press the other week saying we've exploited our oil and gas, we've built up a sovereign wealth fund to the tune of trillions as a consequence of that, and we're selling you energy all of the time. This is crazy. So I think that the Overton window is moving on this in a really fascinating way and quite quickly, I think.
Absolutely. I'm very, very excited about that. I really am. But again, will people trust any of the parties that are sort of suddenly changing their views on these things? It's interesting, Labour sort of, Tony Blair, David Blunkett, others moving back. And again, everyone blaming Ed Miliband, but it's a Keir Starmer policy. It was in the manifesto. Ed Miliband didn't write the manifesto. Well, let's talk about how big an issue this is in those local elections. You're not voting on a lot of those policies, but we know that national party politics very much impacts local elections. And my goodness me, what a set of local election results we saw, from Thursday's vote and on Friday's results coming through. That by-election victory for Sarah Pushin. She's going to be sworn in as a new Reform MP, taking them back to 5 after the departure of Rupert Lowe. After that win by just 6 votes. 677 seats won by Reform out of more than 650 that were actually up for grabs, most of them from the Tories, but an awful lot taken from Labour as well. Reform now in control of 10 different councils and also 2 moralities as well. Well, among the councillors who was elected last Thursday, I'm delighted to say, is my old mate Darren Grimes, Reform UK councillor for Durham County Council. Let's welcome him to the show. Very good afternoon to you, Councillor Grimes.
A very good afternoon, Julia. Thank you very much for having me on.
I'm very excited. I wasn't very happy when you moved back home when we lost you from London, but don't get to see you as often anymore. But one of my Brexit heroes and a good friend. I'm very, very excited for you. How sure were you were going to win that seat? Were you one of those like going, yeah, this is a walk in the park, or were you surprised by not just your victory but the scale of victory?
No, I think by nature, Julia, I'm actually quite sort of, reserved when it comes to viewing these things as a slam dunk. I never, ever operate like that. But what I would say, though, is that all of the pollsters and the pundits, they had us on, 300 seats. Certainly 500 would be looking immediately very positive, but to get 677, nobody predicted that. Nobody saw that coming. And I think actually, Julia, it goes to the very heart of all the issues that you've just been mentioning there. I mean, you touched on the fact that net zero isn't really a local election issue. Well, hang on, I have to tell you, Julia, the spending, for example, take potholes as one example, the spending on electric JCBs to fill these potholes is huge, right? And that's because of a net zero commitment. So it really does impact the pound and pence spent at a local level as well as a national one.
That's a very good point, actually. When people talk about these estimates of the cost of net zero to people, oh, it's an extra £200 on your electricity, your energy bill, but actually no, it's not. It's all those costs that all the businesses have and all those commitments, not just the net zero officers, but every single commitment on those issues, and all of that ends up being paid for either by the taxpayer or us as consumers. So it all feeds back to us in the end.
Absolutely right, yeah. And the other issues, the visa crackdowns and all these other things, well, for local government, that's been having a real impact, actually, on the allocation of houses and resources. Because don't forget that as soon as you accept one of these, when one is forced upon you, that actually you've got to pay for everything from translation costs to the education of the children. Yeah. So the cost to the taxpayer is always massive. Local elections really do matter, and I think people really understood that in this election. Well,
let's talk about some of those key issues where reform has been doing well. I'll start with the immigration issue. There are two separate ones. One is the illegal migrants coming across the channel, and we had these interviews over the weekend with senior figures in reform basically saying, look, we're basically going to play the game that Republicans have played in America, which is like, we're going to ship out, the Democrats basically saying, oh, we're in favour of all these migrants coming over from Mexico. Well, okay, you can have them then. Send them to Martha's Vineyard and the playgrounds of the lefty rich. Funnily enough, they don't like it. I mean, that's the reality, isn't it? Actually, a lot of these people are shipped into places where, the Labour great and good and the Lib Dem great and good don't actually live. So what is the policy there in terms of the illegal migrants, the boat migrants?
Yeah, so certainly HMOs are a problem in our neck of the woods.
This is houses of multiple occupancy.
Exactly,
so
yes.
Hostels, effectively.
Yeah, and the creation of them. So, for example, I can think of a former bank that has been transformed into, housing 7 men, for example, where actually if you are, imagine you, Julia, in a working class area of County Durham, and you suddenly find out that next door to you and your daughter is a family is a set of 7 fighting age men moving in next door. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you'd be best pleased about it, but for saying that for such a long time, you've been smeared as being racist, bigoted, xenophobic, whatever else. And now Labour expect us to say, oh, well, they understand it now. They get it. They're going to stop handing out these visas like confetti to those from countries who don't share our culture, our values and our views. But I'm not convinced, actually, that the Labour government won't continue to use its statutory powers to actually force us to take in these people. So what we will do is use every single instrument in our power to delay, obfuscate, to actually go around saying no to doing this. And you know what? If the party was to bus people down to number 10 Downing Street, I'd personally cheer them on and wave them off. So be it.
And that's the reality. I've always said if we had the channel migrants who these undocumented men of fighting age turning up from Somalia, Afghanistan, goodness knows where, we don't know. They throw away their documentation. You buy up all the houses in Keir Starmer's street, apart from his house, and you put them in those houses. I think he'd change his tune very, very quickly, and that's the reality. And then you can shout bigot and racist and xenophobe as many people as you want. People don't want it; they don't like it, quite understandably. But that's obviously different from the people who have arrived here legally on visa and study visas, who are then miraculously, the visa finishes after 2 years, 3 years. They go, oh, turns out I need political asylum now. I can't go home. Should any of those people be staying in the country?
Well, I mean, we've got the absurdity now. You've been covering it this morning, where actually the US might be sending people to Rwanda paid for by the British taxpayer. So, you know, the whole thing is a total farce. And the asylum and migration policies have been mismanaged in the extreme. And it's impacted not just us culturally, but economically massively too. I'm not sure that anyone coming here on for example, a student visa, they're claiming asylum after the event. I'm not sure that ought to be acceptable. And the government, His Majesty's government, Sir Keir Starmer's government, have actually said themselves that they're going to tighten up the rules around this.
But again, when they say they're going to tighten them, what does that actually mean? I mean, bearing in mind, we're looking at 30% of those asylum applications are from people who are already here but were here on a legal visa. So it's on a huge scale.
It's an industrial scale, absolutely. And these routes, Julia, are being exploited for that deliberate reason, because once you're in the country, the likelihood of you being told to leave again is very slim indeed, because actually the human rights monopoly, the human rights factory, has actually made people very, very wealthy indeed. So I don't trust the vested interests. And let's not forget what Sir Keir Starmer was in a former life too.
Indeed, a human rights lawyer, of course. Let's also talk about winter fuel allowance, because the front page of The Guardian today, you know, Pippa Crerar, you know, the political editor there, very well connected, saying that, you know, government's possibly looking at some sort of change, a U-turn, a semi-U-turn, on the winter fuel allowance payments. Basically, 10 million pensioners lost out. Some of them very well-off pensioners, many of them, though, just above the poverty line. People who weren't getting pensioner credit, often or not even didn't know they were eligible for it, really missing out on that £300 a year, you know, for the extra bills in the winter. Turns out that, you know, if you poll people on that is the biggest cut-through policy that Labour have had since they've got into power, and it makes people angry on every side of the political divide. Some cabinet ministers apparently saying to journalists they believe that is their equivalent of the Tory poll tax in terms of how damaging it is. Do you think any sort of reset of that, any version of a U-turn, means testing it, whatever they did, do you think anything that Labour could do on that would actually undo the damage that policy has done?
No, I'm not convinced that it would actually, Julia, because I think the optic has already set in. I mean, for example, yesterday watching the Prime Minister sat alongside veterans who had served in World War II for 80 years on from VE Day, actually looking at him being sat with them whilst acknowledging that this is the Prime Minister that has stripped them of their winter fuel payments. You know, people that served our country and reclaimed its freedom or protected its freedom. It didn't sit well with me whatsoever. So this big brain idea actually to cut winter fuel payments to look good from an economic standpoint, well, actually no, all you did was say we're happy to spend £4 to £5 billion on asylum for those who've come here illegally, but those who've worked all their lives, chucking taxpayer cash, bogus asylum claims and all the other things we've already mentioned. And now we're meant to believe that after getting totally spanked at the ballot box, they're suddenly all for our pensioners and our elderly. They made clear they couldn't give a flying flamingo.
I was just going to say, edit whatever you're going to say. For goodness sake. So people just aren't going to trust them, you say. I mean, look,
no.
Among the councils where reform has now taken control is Durham, where you are now a councillor. You've got Derbyshire, Kent, Lancashire, Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, Staffordshire. Others, you know, wrested from, you know, from control of the party to no overall control. But in Durham, are you going to be following that policy announced by Zia Youssef, your party chair, that no flags are going to be flown on any council building unless it's the Union flag or it's the St George's cross, and that's it, de nada, nothing else?
So, look, the things like the regimental flags, right, on when we celebrate the Durham Light Infantry, for example, a regiment that's very, very well respected in this part of the world. My grandfather served in the DLI. You know, I would very much be willing to see their flag fly, our county flag, seeing that fly. But what we're talking about here is a political party that finally says that actually councils ought to be flying the flag of our country city or our county, not every single activist cause under the sun. You know, you'd think that asking for the Union Jack to actually fly over town halls instead of a flag which I think has become more associated, that rainbow-coloured one, with the mutilation of children, frankly, Julia, and an ideology that I think has ruined the lives of scores of kids. Reform's plan is actually just about common sense, but instead you get decried with fascism or howls of whatever else. But I actually think that we're on the side of the Brits here, who want to see their institutions that they pay for not turned into progressive propaganda machines.
Yeah, and with divisive, the whole point of flags is they're supposed to unite us rather than divide us. And again, certainly the rainbow flag I used to think was a flag that was a lovely flag about gay pride, but the one they use now is trans, it's Black Lives Matter, it's got everything. It's a blatantly racist and misogynistic flag in my view. I don't want to see it at all. Can I ask about in terms of the threat that reform poses? We were talking earlier in the show about the game changer results there. It wasn't a majority of council seats in this country. It was only one set of elections, but lots of people were saying how Nigel Farage made a mistake not downplaying some expectations, as a lot of other parties do ahead of these sort of results, when in fact he massively exceeded them. He would have liked a few more mayoralties, but he got the Runcorn by-election by 6 votes, in the narrowest possible of margins, other than 1 vote. But in terms of the threat that reform now poses to the other major parties, Labour are sort of second-guessing themselves right now. Tories are second-guessing. There's question marks about Kemi Badenoch's leadership already. She's not even been in the job for a year. Do you think that the threat from reform to the main party system is going to be such that they're going to face the same problem that other parties called hard right or far right across Europe has felt? The National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party. I know very different parties from reform, but some often talking about policies like anti-net zero and anti-mass immigration. But National Rally and Marine Le Pen being currently banned from standing for the next French presidency, even though she's the odds-on favourite to win it. The AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, over the weekend designated an extremist organisation, even though, of course, huge success in recent parliamentary elections. And we've seen basically the Tories and the Labour leaders equivalent in Germany ganging together to kind of agree, although the first vote has not gone well, for Friedrich Merz to take over as Chancellor, to basically keep the AfD out. Do you think that the Tories and the Labour, rather than cozying up to reform to win votes, are actually more likely to work together to keep you guys out?
Yeah, I mean, look, I certainly think that they're spooked. Let's not beat around the bush. This is an unprecedented win. You're talking actually it being as seismic as a century ago when the Labour Party came into prominence as a real opposition party to the Liberals, for example, back in that political moment. But the knives are obviously out, as you've rightly identified, but it's not for the wet Blairites running the show or whatever else. The parties are split. Look at the Labour Party. It's split between those who want a form of religious sectarianism in Britain, who do care about net zero and all these other things, and then it's split between wet Blairites who are coming round to the Tony Blair side of the argument, that says net zero is mad and that actually mass migration hasn't worked for us. It's exactly the same, Julia, in the Tory party. I think actually you can identify, without the religious sectarianism element, you can identify a massive split within that party as well. We are the only political party that is actually united on policy positions and as a united front in standing up for what we think is in the best interests of this country. They couldn't organise a piddle up in a brewery at the moment, I'm afraid. So, we've got to be honest about this. And even if you get rid of Kemi Badenoch, the Tories have proven that they're totally done. They cannot decide who they are, what they're about. The Labour Party, well, they're certainly not for Labour. They're for illegal migrants over anybody up here at this point in time. So I'm disinterested, if I'm brutally honest with you. I don't see them as threats. I see them actually as has-beens. I see them as those who spent 14 years, admittedly the Labour's had 10 months in government already, but what have they shown us? Well, they promised us change. That change has meant mass migration, it's meant net zero on steroids, it's meant stripping pensioners of their winter fuel payments, farmers, family farms being put up for sale because of this inheritance tax that they're now facing. It is a disgrace. If this has changed, Julia, I think we've woken up in some kind of nightmare. I really, really do.
Councillor Darren Grimes, former UK Councillor, Durham County Council, thank you for joining us. Tom Slater, he's good, isn't he?
No, absolutely, and congratulations to him on his electoral win. No mean feat, and it's telling, isn't it? Like, I think the thing we're really coming to terms with now is that reform is the question around British politics is now based. You know, it's how are the main parties going to respond to it?
And the commentariat can be as sneery as they want.
No, exactly, and I think that's one thing that, aside from anything else, they've got to start taking this a lot more seriously. They can't just rely on this sneering, this dismissal.
And they really are. They still are. The tone of everything that is written is just again, still thinking it's a protest vote.
No, absolutely, and it's quite clearly not. Farage is in Parliament now. And so that deflection could no longer apply. They have got a ground game now. So again, that deflection no longer works.
They're losing a load of their donors to them, the Tories certainly.
And there's a lot of momentum behind them, but it's because of the fact that thing that motored Brexit, which was not just about the European Union, it was also about Westminster and how much it had forgotten large parts of the country, are now turning to reform in a way they might previously have done with Boris Johnson's Conservatives as the means to hit out a political establishment that has failed them. How they can't see this, even though this is the story of the past 10 years in British politics, is incredible.
Yeah. Well, some of them just discovered it over the weekend. So, well done for noticing what everyone. I mean, keep your eyes open. Exactly. They spend too much time looking into their chai lattes and not enough time looking at what's going on in the world. 12:25 is time. I want to hear from you. Your reaction to what a lot of what our guest Darren Grimes, I've got to call Councillor Grimes, had to say. It really tickles me that. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Love to know from you. Just so you know, immigration visa crackdown, maybe a U-turn on winter fuel payments. Is that enough to win Labour's votes back, or are they long gone? They've only lent them really to get rid of the Tories, in which case what can the Tories do to get those votes back? Or again, are they now an end? I mean, the most successful political party in the Western world for the last century and a half, are they finished now? Again, a lot of people talk about, it's the end of two-party politics, the end of this, the end of that. Never say never, I have to say. But what are your thoughts? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text on 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. Up next, take a quick break. And coming up, we're also going to be talking more about those VE Day 80th anniversary commemorations, and also why Labour risks taxing high streets out of existence altogether. This is Talk.
Nigel Farage and Reform do not have to do anything at the moment other than not be Labour or the Tories. You know, all he has to do is not be Keir Starmer and not be Kemi Badenoch.
Right.
Now,
but also, I think what will also become a key battleground, of course, will be this business that was introduced by Zia Youssef on Sunday and Laura Kunsberg and other shows, where he says, you know, we're going to actively challenge the reform councils where we are, particularly in Kent, which will be an interesting one.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just time to, running a little bit late, I always do. I'm talking to Councillor Grimes a bit too long. Let's get some of your messages coming in about, you know, the reform earthquake and Labour planning an immigration visa crackdown, winter fuel allowance, possible U-turn. What's your reaction to all of that? Joanne says he should cut the taxes imposed on businesses too. Jobs are being lost. I mean, quite literally being lost right now. Bruce says, with the winter fuel payment, what the government should have done is give it to people who are receiving housing benefits. That way, they would not be giving it to rich pensioners. That's a fair point. But also, again, you can give it to everybody, but if you're well off, you get taxed. I've never understood. I remember discussing that at the time. You just make sure people are taxed and then they don't get the benefit of it. Bearing in mind also, if you're a rich pensioner, you've probably paid a heck of a lot of tax over the years, haven't you? Bernard says, nope. I'm asking, will that be enough to win back votes? Nope, is the response. It's just doing what they should have been doing anyway. To have to be dragged kicking and screaming to do it is not a good look. Greg says, never forgive Labour and the Tory party for what they've done to our once great nation. I think we might have to try out reform for a few years. And Susan says, too little, too late. It's going to take more than a wasted U-turn to convince me to vote Labour. You'd need to replace the entire party with reform. A lot of reform supporters here. Michael says, how many parties have promised to crack down on asylum? I'm not even sure I trust Farage. He's only really just saying what we all want to hear. Except he has been saying it for a very long time when everyone was still shouting bigot and racist at him. Claire says, never voting for Labour, ever, never did to start with. So exactly, they're not going to win back your vote, in which case why should they worry about your vote, you could argue. Claire says they would have to do more than crack down on migration and U-turn on winter fuel. They would have to sack Red Ed and Rachel Thieves as well to even begin to tempt me. This comes back, Tom Slater, to what you were saying a bit earlier in the show, which is, you know, actually there was never this massive big support for Labour. It might have looked like it in the polls before the election, but on election day, it was down to 34%. I mean, basically, it was largely a vote against the Tories.
Yeah, 34% of the vote, historically low turnout. I think if you crunch the numbers, effectively about 20% of the available electorate, you know, voted.
Yeah, no, I never play with that because people play with that on Brexit. Well, it wasn't a majority voting for Brexit because my 2-year-old didn't get to vote. You sort of into that territory.
But at the same time, we've never seen like a elected majority in Parliament on such a tiny slither of the actual electorate. It just shows how
still
this
legitimate. That's the system.
Of course, but it's an indication of how fragile
they're
this
not.
government
If
is.
you're not starting with that, but that's the thing is, although they've got a big majority, they can actually get anything they want done. They could really remould the nation in their honour. But I mean, to be fair, I mean we've had a Labour government in for the last 14 years anyway, haven't we? We've had Labour light. I mean, now they're going to try and be Tory light. I mean, we're basically getting the narrow sliver of views, and they could all be Lib Dems.
Yeah, I mean, it's also funny how even with that majority, they are really struggling to impose their agenda anyway.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
And that's
I don't know whether we can do this or not. You can do anything you want with a majority of 160, but the same with the Tories. It really peed me off. Even when they were losing MPs left, right and centre, they still had... And Rishi Sunak went to the Parliament, went to the country, what he had, a 60 majority? If you've got a 60 majority, you can do anything you want.
And it's one of those things where I think it points to, in both cases, them pledging to do things that they don't actually want to do, which is definitely true of Labour in many respects. Also, particularly in the case of Labour, not really knowing what it wants to do.
It's weird that, isn't it? All that effort to get into power.
Exactly. And so as soon as they hit a bit of turbulence, or as soon as they see public opinion is really souring on them, they just run around like headless chickens. Yeah. On this question of does he need to get rid of Rachel Reeves or Ed Miliband, I mean, of course, in some ways. But this fish is rotting from the head down. Keir Starmer is the problem.
Exactly.
No, people, to the extent that people have a strong feeling about him, it's always a negative one. They're either indifferent to him or they hate him. That is a really bad position for any Prime Minister.
I'm just saying, come the revolution, when I'm Empress in charge, Empress in charge of the world, things will be different. I will have a purpose, I can assure you of that. Anyway, right now, we're going to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich at the end of May. Just happens to coincide with watching the biggest game in European football, the Champions League final. We're also putting $5 grand in your pocket to spend however you want.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive $5 grand in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win that VIP trip, simply text the word football to 3338 by the 16th of May, 11 p.m. A text will cost you £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Comp, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. It must arrive by 5 p.m. on May the 21st.
Do not miss out on that fantastic competition. A incredible giveaway from our colleagues at TalkSport, just down the corridor. Very good luck to you. 12:35 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk to the brilliant historian and commentator Rafe Hadel-Mancu about all things VE Day commemorations and a little bit of wokedom as well. That's coming up. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. At 12:37 is the time. Tom Slater is still with me, editor of Spiked Online. I'm delighted to say we're joined in the studio. Lots of guests in the studio today. It's really nice. Lovely to see you, Rafe Hadel-Mancu, who's an historian and commentator. Lovely to have you actually in the studio. Very significant day. And actually, it's interesting. One of the most significant things happening today, marking VE Day commemorations, the 80th anniversary of all this week, really, even bank holiday right through to Thursday, the actual 8th of the month. Is literally, I can see it across the river. We're right near Tower Bridge. We've got the Tower of London, where the King and the Queen are visiting that. I mean, it's brought back again. Just amazing ceramic poppy exhibition. And I have to say, I saw it the first time around. It's is just incredibly moving and very, very beautiful. But that's not the only thing that's happening today. And of course, we had all these amazing events over the weekend, the fly pass and everything else. But talk us through all the major events of the week.
Yes, so this is day 2 of a 4-day celebration of the 80th anniversary of VE Day. As you say, today we have the unveiling of the ceramic poppies at the Tower of London, which were originally unveiled in 2014 to mark the centenary of the First World War. Those were 800,000, now they're only 30,000, and they're formed in the shape of a heart here to symbolise the open wound when the Tower of London itself was damaged by bombs. But key also today, they're going to light up landmarks across London and across the whole country, from Belfast City Hall to Cardiff Castle, just as happened on VE Day itself, because people must remember, for 5 years there was a blackout. No lights were allowed, you had to have blackout curtains in your houses, changing the lamps on your cars. The ARP, the air raid, would come and knock on your door if they could see a chink of light. And suddenly on VE Day, everything became aglow again. You know, Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus, if you're in the West End, Shaftesbury Avenue, Soho. But all around the country, the searchlights that had scanned the skies, they made themselves into the V for Victory symbol, which became iconic, and then they turned their lights onto the cathedrals and the castles of the country. So we're going to have
a been in dark for so long.
Of that.
And we've talked so much in recent years with these such important commemorations going on. In Armistice Day as well, we have fewer and fewer of the heroes who I mean, watch their comrades fall to die for our future of our country. But so many of these incredibly brave men and women who are thankfully still with us, but fewer and fewer to every single event. And of course, it was noticeable, wasn't it, the royal family gathering at Buckingham Palace on the balcony for the fly past yesterday, that there was no member of the royal family who was actually served in the Second World War being there. And of course, you know, the Prince Philip, important role, the Queen, the late Queen, an important role back at home. And it's interesting, you talk about this image, I had a big smile on my face when we talk so much about the incredible sacrifices that our armed forces took, but this was an entire, you know, whole nation effort, and the impact on ordinary men, women and children back home in the UK was huge. And some of the images of the relief, the joy that people felt when this absolute horror finally ended, well, in Europe here at least.
Yeah, that's crucial. Well, the first thing, of course, this wasn't the end of the war. There was still 3 months more to fight till we had victory over Japan Day on August the 15th with the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But you're quite right. I mean, people need to understand this was the biggest celebration in British history, VE Day, because for the peoples of Europe, the war was over. 6 long years, which had seen 35 to 50 million people killed, including 350,000 British armed forces. It liberated, of course, the Channel Islands, only part of the British Isles to be occupied by the Nazis. And it meant for millions of people at home, they'd be reunited with their fathers, their brothers, their sons. And, of course, also for so many people in the country, it was a moment when finally they realised no more would Britain be devastated by aerial bombardment. You know, not only was London destroyed, but Liverpool, Birmingham, Southampton, so many cities. 95% of the buildings in Hull were damaged or destroyed in the Blitz. 40,000 people died in that country. So that's why Churchill came out onto the balcony of the Ministry of Health with the crowds assembled there, and he said, "This is your victory. In all our long history, we have never seen a greater day than this."
And it was a whole country event, and it's fascinating to when we've seen the event, the horrific invasion of Ukraine. And indeed, what's happening, the massacre on 7th of October in Israel, when you see polls of Brits and indeed Americans, like, would you be willing to fight for your country? How many people, particularly young people, say they wouldn't be willing to fight for their country? And again, it's one thing, isn't it, to talk about a far-off war, like would you be willing to fight for Britain in Iraq or Afghanistan? It's very different from would you be willing to actually to protect your nation state? And I find it flabbergasting that people wouldn't be. People say nothing's worth dying for. Oh, there are lots of things that are worth dying for, and we've seen people of Ukraine and people of Israel, understanding the need of that. And we've got to talk about this threat from Russia. We've had alleged terrorist plot and arrests made involving Iranians as well. The threat right now is very real, and these are moments where we can unite as a nation, but also we need to talk not just about our past, but about the present and talk about the future as well. And that's something you've done a lot as a commentator on sort of, we say, woke issues, but actually on really important British values and cultural issues, and as a historian as well, being able to understand the significance of those, because it seems to me one of the key ways we honour the sacrifice that was made by the men and women who died in the war, in all the wars, but particularly in the Second World War, is that we protect the the values and the freedoms and the culture that they were trying to protect from the Nazis.
And that's been one of the themes of VE Day, actually. Yesterday we saw the torch of peace passed on from a 100-year-old veteran, saying, you know, these celebrations are not static. You know, the fight for our freedoms and our liberties carries on and continues. We now have the longest war since the Second World War taking place within our continent. It is very much about that. Unfortunately, what we've had, of course, is we've had 30 years whereby British culture, British history and British identity have been systematically undermined. We've had ideological subversion being taught in our schools. So, and the complete erosion of our history, where our heroes have been denigrated and all of our achievements have been denigrated.
Yeah, Churchill's a racist and things like that.
So it's no surprise then that in the last 10 years we've seen a halving. From 2008, 80% of youth 18 to 24 were proud to be British. Today it's only 40%. So we call...
That's mind-blowing, isn't it?
It's
the majority of young people are not proud to be British. Where would they be proud to be from, I wonder?
But there's no surprise.
Somalia?
If the media, the universities, academia, the government, if everybody is essentially saying that Britain is the source of all evil and the West is, you've got the original sin of slavery and all of the nonsense.
And the Industrial Revolution.
And the Industrial Revolution.
You're welcome, world.
The greatest leap forward in 12,000 years of human evolution, born right here in Britain. We get none of the praise for that. Everything has a negative origin to it. So why would you buy into Britain? And of course, you have to remember also a large part of the youth of today are ethnic minorities, and of course they're always taught now about systemic racism, about white privilege, and so again, you know, it's much easier to cleave more to the more masculine, well-defined faith of your families than
although interestingly, actually, in terms of people being very sort of patriotic. Actually, many ethnic minority groups in this country are actually some of the most patriotic in the country. What do you make of these stories about the British flag, so the Union flag, but also the St George's Cross? The Reform UK chairman after that victory, the victories on Thursdays, 10 councils, county councils and others they're now in charge of, saying, look, no flag is going to fly on our buildings, no rainbow flags, no this flag, no that flag. It's going to be the Union Jack, or it's going to be the St George's Cross. I mean, Councillor Darren Grimes was just saying also, you know, local county flags and things should be, that they're the only flags that should be flown on council buildings. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Well, and Darren is quite right. Traditional flags of Britain must be flown. So the county flags, the boroughs of London flags. I mean, if you're on a council level, you need to have some civic pride for your local areas. But we must.
I live in Camden. Do we have a Camden borough flag?
There's a Camden flag and coat of arms.
Oh, it's probably got a picture of a trans woman on it. It's probably got a trans woman and an illegal migrant on it, shaking hands or something.
But
in Camden.
We're fraying as a society, right? So identity politics is causing fissures in our society. We've got ethno-nationalist states developing in this country. We're becoming United Nations rather than a United Kingdom. We've got all the identity politics going on. We need to have an overarching British culture rather than prioritising minority.
Can I bring Tom Slater in listening to this? I mean, look, you're on the left, but do you feel patriotic?
Well, they wouldn't recognise me as
They wouldn't recognise you. No, do you know what a man and a woman is? Things like that. Basically, you can count. But would you? I mean, would you? Do you feel strongly about the flag? Do you feel pride when you see the national flag?
Well, pride is not necessarily the way I'd put it. I'm certainly very grateful for having been born in this country where there's so much, the freedoms that we enjoy, which were built on the struggle not of just people who died in war, but also struggled domestically for our own rights and representation. I take a lot of inspiration from that long history of people.
Didn't just happen, guys.
No, absolutely. And it's one of those things where also recognising that, and this is something that in recent years, of course, the left have had complete problems with, is that if you really want a kind of cohesive society, then a shared identity as a nation is so much more important. It's actually the route to unity rather than division. They had it completely the other way around.
You'll find diversity is our strength. You obviously not read the memo. You try to keep up with the programme, Mr. Slater, because no, but exactly, you're right. Again, you need to have something you believe in. Again, if you don't espouse any British values, you just say multiculturalism is great and blah blah blah. No, our culture isn't a superior culture. Then you've got nothing to protect, to fight for. Just finally, I want to ask you, it's not as important as VE commemorations or the like, but and willingness to fight for your country, but willingness to fight for your rights as women. I want to ask you, Ray Fador Mankiw, about this. I mean, it's kind of absurd. I live in this area. I know that I wouldn't go swimming in these ponds. They're absolutely horrible and freezing. I don't know why people do it. But Hampstead Heath has got a women's pond and a men's pond, and there's this whole big thing that trans-identified men, calling themselves trans women, have been using the women's pond. Women are going, no, you can't. Over the weekend, obviously after the Supreme Court judgment, clearly, if it's a women's pond, then men shouldn't be allowed in it, whether they call themselves Sheila or not, or have a GRC, a gender recognition certificate. But women's rights campaigners, about 30 of them, wearing false beards, wigs and moustaches, descended on the men-only pond on Bank Holiday Monday, demanding to be let in, saying to the police officer who was there to guard it, "We self-identify as male." I think this is hilarious. It's no different to Isla Bryson putting on a wig and having his genitals shown through his pink leggings, saying, "I'm a woman, I want to go, I've raped 2 women, I want to go into a women's prison." They weren't let in, other than the fact you climbed over fences and got in. What's interesting there is that there is a mixed pond. There's a mixed gender pond, and yet the trans activists apparently feel the need to go to the women's pond. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, that's the point I was going to make. There are 3 ponds in Hampstead you can go and choose to. And it's always, of course, women who have to suffer here, isn't it? As you know, it's always the case women's spaces are going to be closed down and shut down. Of course, we have, now women's lavatories have to become gender neutral. That's my fear. Will the ladies' pond now suddenly also become a mixed pond just to try to let this thing go away?
But the men's pond can carry on as it was.
The men's pond, of course, that will carry on.
It's so extraordinary, isn't it? Rafe Hagelman, we covered a lot of ground there. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. Great to have you in the studio as well. 12:48 is the time. This is Talk.
Nigel Farage and Reform do not have to do anything at the moment other than not be Labour or the Tories. You know, all he has to do is not be Keir Starmer and not be Kemi Badenoch.
Right. Now, but also, I think what will also become a key battleground, of course, will be this business that was introduced by Zia Yusuf on Sunday and Laura Kunsberg and other shows, where he says, we're going to actively challenge the reform councils where we are, particularly in Kent, which will be an interesting one.
DAB+ on your smart speaker, on your smart TV.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:51 is the time. Tom Slater's still with us. Delighted to be joined right now by Maxwell Marlow, who's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute, the free market think tank. Very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Lovely to talk to you. I want to talk to you about Labour risks taxing high streets out of existence. We've got the chairman of the newly formed High Street Regeneration Group. This is Alex Riley. He said the Chancellor's raid on employers was harming job creation. It risks triggering yet more closures of jobs and restaurants, whether it's the national insurance hike, the lowering of the threshold to pay it, plus, of course, the minimum wage as well. And basically, they're saying going to tax high streets out of existence. How concerned should we be?
We should be really concerned, Julia. This is really bad news. Look, I mean, this new group says it. Kate Nichols from UK Hospitality says the same thing. Sasha Lord, the former nightlife advisor to Andy Burnham in Manchester, he's saying exactly the same thing. There are calls of outrage across Britain's high streets about this huge tax raid that, either we pay it as customers going to the high street, or the companies take on board the cost and they eventually get shut down. So the high streets are in serious crisis. There is no plan from the government of how to reverse this trend. And we can see more and more degradation. We'll see more and more Turkish barbershops, of course. That's absolutely fine. But we will see, tea rooms, pubs, restaurants, shops, up and down the country being closed down because of this vicious tax raid, really.
Well, there seems to be a lot of relaxation about it. Oh, well, people are shopping out of town. Well, no, those big out-of-town shopping centres aren't doing well either. Oh, well, don't worry, it's all going to be cafes and it's going to be lifestyle. Well, no, they can't make ends meet either. As you say, sort of, the barber shops, pop-up candy stores, that's the other one on the high streets, charity shops and betting shops. That seems to be all there are. Even my area, again, nice leafy area, an awful lot of closed-up stores. The shoplifting alone has killed off a couple of the stores. They simply can't survive with so much of that hit to their takings. But it's a whole raft of issues, isn't it? It isn't. It's high rates. It's high rates, high rents. It's the cost of the staff, the minimum wage, the national insurance hikes as well. But it is also local council policies making it impossible for people to stop, park their car, do a bit of shopping and come back again. Nope. You lose 5 minutes. That's it. That's your lot, and you're going to be charged sort of £6 to park for 5 minutes, and then your car's going to be towed away. There are so many things counting against any local shop on the high street actually being able to make a living and attract customers, and you're actually going to spend money.
Absolutely. It's a problem of big government at the end of the day. It's the problem the government think they can come in, solve all the problems. Looking at those councils, for example, I don't entirely blame them, to be honest. They're all bankrupt because there are so many obligations from central government on them to provide all these different services. But again, when I speak to hospitality companies, especially in the nightlife sector, especially pubs, one of the big issues they've got is planning. It's getting licensed to open in different areas, and then they've got to comply with all these noise rules. And they've got to, worry about the upcoming banter ban that's coming through the House of Lords at the moment. There are so many rules to deal with and to respond to. They're just going bust. So it's no wonder. I think the high street will be a thing of the past in 10 years' time.
And the thing is,
there's no reason.
There are a lot of people who seem to live in this sort of world where everything's just on their phone and they don't ever seem to leave the house, and their Deliveroos and Uber Eats or whatever. Although those companies, again, not doing so well. People can't afford a lot of those deliveries now. Times are hard. But they don't seem to understand how important the high street is for local communities. You bump into people. I love my local high street now. I know a lot of the shopkeepers, chatted to them during lockdown before and talked to them about the shoplifting, but know each other by name, and it's just that local community, particularly for older people, particularly people who live alone, to have that community. It's an important part, same as the pubs and the cafes, an important part of local neighbourhoods. And when those things are gone, can't get them back again.
Exactly. I've always said, the pub is essentially the family home of the British people. Everyone can go there. Everyone's welcome. It's a really great place for people to socialise, bring communities together. There is a war on pubs at the moment, whether you're looking at, alcohol duty, Rachel Reeves came out with this insane thing in her last budget that, we're cutting back a penny off the pint. Yeah. Wrong entirely. It's madness. Yeah. The price of a pint, bottle of wine, spirit's gone up, a multitude of that. So, it's not just the pub, it's all sorts of areas.
It's pretty patronising, that, isn't it? And again...
Oh, absolutely.
And again, people got used during lockdown. Again, lots of these shops, a lot of the pubs, a lot of cafes and restaurants, they are still dealing with huge debt they've got completely just hanging over them since lockdown as well. They've not had a chance to recover. And of course, that VAT on food and drink in a pub, but it's not there when you buy it in a supermarket.
Yeah, of course. That's part of our insane VAT rules. So I'm sure you may remember this, Julia. Pastrygate or Pastygate, really. Pastygate. Yeah. So that's the rule that if you have hot food being served, it's vatable. But if it's cold, it's not, which is completely crazy. And it really changes our behaviour. It's very strange. But again, it comes back to this fundamental problem. The government is way too involved in the day-to-day lives of the British people and the shops we choose to go to. Let's get government out. Let's cut those taxes. Let's bring back the British high street.
Absolutely. Maxwell Marlowe there from the Adam Smith Institute. Let me just bring in Tom Slater on that. It is really important. You did an interesting podcast with Christopher Snowdon. You had Luke Johnson on recently, I remember, and talking about this and how times are so hard for these small businesses.
No, absolutely. And obviously, government is making life very difficult for them. The thing I do worry about is that there's been a kind of cultural shift underneath the surface as well, that we were kind of trending towards being a bit more atomised, preferring everything to just be delivered to your house, not have to deal with people. Yeah. You then have lockdown, which obviously just enforces that as a matter of law. And I think that's part of the picture here as well, is that we're starting to live much more kind of lonelier existence.
Yeah, and a lot of the people, I think, making these rules, that's the life that they live. Maybe that's what they want. I don't know, but I don't think it's the life most of us want. I'm always amazed at people who half the people walking around my local supermarket are staff doing shopping for people, but not like a big sort of delivery, but just literally like loads, and they're paying 20% more for it, and not leaving their home. I just got this image at one point we're just going to all just be big blobs of flap just sitting there getting everything delivered, having no existence and no 3D life at all. It's really, really sad. Talking of sad, bad news from Downing Street, they have ruled out a U-turn on means testing the winter fuel payment. Official spokesman, the Prime Minister, said the policy is set out. There will not be a change to the government's policy. It was all about following the £22 billion black hole left by the previous government. There won't be a U-turn, the government has said. I'm telling you right now, that means there will be a U-turn. There will, because they just don't stick to anything they say. Joining us right now is Ian Collins to find out what's happening on your show.
I can't believe they mentioned the 22 billion black hole.
I can't believe, what a surprise.
I've heard of it. Yeah. First I've really heard about that.
I mean, where do they find that from? Yeah, exactly. Do you reckon they'll end up U-turning on it? Would it make any difference?
Would it make any difference? Well, I think to Labour it won't make any difference now. I don't think there's... I know we're 4 years away.